Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Astro Pub. Welcome to office hours. How y'all doing today? All right, let me get everything else here. Pop the chat out here. ISC was very interesting today. It was. It was actually really good. Let's get to the office, shall we? Almost Friday. So good. How about down yonder? It's good. For summer school, I don't have Fridays, so I have, and I just ended the first session of summer school, so I got nothing to do until Monday. Planning on doing a lot of editing tomorrow. Editing and painting. This is not going to show up right because it's super green, but it's not too bad. I've got a bunch of grots that I'm finishing up. In terms of my infantry for orcs, I've got those grots. I've got some tank busters that I have to finish up, and then I've got a war boss, a weird boy, and a big mech and mega armor. Oh no, I've got some others as well. I also got a pain boy and a knob with a wog banner, and I'm looking down now at the rest of the stuff, and a runt herd, but not a lot. They should have tried to reassure people that they're trying to fix the problems with the game. I agree. How you doing, Luke? I think it was a really good ISC, but there's still lots of questions that hang out there because it's like, I'm really interested in seeing what Jumptown 2.0 is, or what Xenothreat Redux is, or how that full lockdown works with the Ninetales. Those all sound very interesting and fun. If the game functions, which it currently doesn't in terms of desync, especially when you're dealing with PvP stuff, desync's a huge issue. Are you looking forward to expanding the Ninetales foothold in Stanton? Aw, Tagram. You know me so well. Listen, they pay me to smuggle. I'm going to smuggle. I'm going to fight for the people who pay me the money. I'm sorry, Crusader. You're nice people. But I got job security on the line. Still think CIG should have started the Tavaran with Tavaran after the duel. We'll see. I mean, I think I don't, let me do it this way. I don't think CIG is not working on improving performance. That's what they're doing that. The question becomes, can they do it in a short amount of time? And the other question becomes, how can they figure that out? And those questions aren't answered unless somebody like Jared or Xylo or some other team members go out and try to hunt down the people who's responsible for that, or the bigwigs get together and form like a council, a meeting to discuss these things and figure out what they can do about it. And otherwise, it's just the stuff they've planned out. Anyone who's kind of been in large-scale projects before knows that there's usually, especially as you grow in terms of size, there are some people who you just have to let them work on their own. They have to function on their own, with their own autonomy, with a manager or a lead somewhere, a team lead, and that team lead will report back to you with what's going on, but you just cannot micromanage 600 people. That also means that you're also trusting those people are working on the things they're supposed to and are working on time. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth of those sorts of things. So as a result, they may not know if desync is going to be fixed in this next patch or not. But at the very least, I'd like them to tell us, because it's been around for a year. And if they don't know about it, hey, CIG, there's a major problem with desync where people are not where they're supposed to be, and it's killing the game. Please fix it. And if you do know about it, please tell us what the status is with this. We would just like you to acknowledge that there's a problem and that you're working on it and there are solutions that you're trying to chase down. We'd just like to know. That's simple. Tyler asks, does anyone know the planet that was featured in the RSI Constellation Aquila commercial? Was it Garon 2? No, it's a mythical planet. They even say that in the aftercrawl that this is a fictitious planet. So, not to sound like somebody with a tinfoil hat. It was all on a soundstage, guys. It was all on a soundstage. They faked it. Inverse. They faked it. The last I see of Alien Week, I would have loved to see some updates on the BMM. You weren't going to have that. Anyone who thought that you were going to have updates in the Bennu Merchantman, you just set yourself up for disappointment. CIG hasn't even finished the initial stages of the Bennu Merchantman. The Bennu Merchantman is not coming out for a long time. Trust me, I bought it Wave 1 when it was when it was on sale as a concept. I'm cool without it. We don't need it right now. Hey, Starlet. Hey, Jade. Tarnfolk asks, says, I'm willing to bet that Ninetales will be playing more, so I'm signing up to fight with them. Okay, yeah. Starlet says, I feel like Paul is looking right at me when he says no BMN free. No, Starlet. Just specifically you. Luke asks, theory, do you think the Vandul could be an engineered species designed to harvest materials for a larger solar system civilization? Possibly. Anything, the sky's the limit. The answer is CIG probably doesn't even know. There's probably a large blank spaces in the stories where they're like fill in later with ideas, because there's no reason for this kind of situation to have all of the answers in. In fact, most writing, you don't want to leave answers. You don't want to have a lot of details which don't matter that you have to put in the game, in a game or TV show or book or whatever for just for saying that you have it. It's best to leave that out there. Anxious, I would prefer personal inventory, item selling, and profitable commodity trading to be working when BMM releases, honestly, so I can wait. Yeah, and I agree. That's the same. Like, we don't need it. None of the Bennu Merchantman's functionality is in the game yet, and it won't be for at least a year. So, and that's at least. My memory on the duel, the Bennu created them, or my theory on the duel created them and forgot about it because they don't have history. Hence why the duel have its relations. But yeah, could be. Why can't CIG better communicate with the players? What's the disconnect? It's not really disconnect. It's this is gonna sound weird, but doing the research I've done on how video games are developed and how software developed, I've kind of like was not groomed or like born and raised in a software development studio situation, but I was born in San Francisco, raised in the East Bay. My uncle was a tech guy. A lot of my family friends were in tech, so I kind of absorbed a lot of this kind of tech mentality. And for those of you who haven't worked in a studio like the kind of Silicon Valley type studio, you don't really understand how game develop works, because a lot of it is very similar to that. It's not like a cubicle where you sit there and you just type away. Some of it is, but not really. In American studios tend not to have that, especially CIG doesn't have that kind of mentality. The answer is that they don't know. There's a lot of stuff they just don't know about. For instance, if they can fix the desync, they don't know. They're probably chasing down solutions, but there's no point in telling us that they're chasing down solutions if those solutions don't pan out. And so they're adopting the philosophy of, if they don't know, they're not going to tell us. Which makes sense. And it sucks because it means there's large gaps of information we don't have, because CIG doesn't have that information quite yet. But if you tell people that, they panic. because people are stupid. And people who don't understand how these sorts of things work, and I know that's a meme, you don't understand how development works. I do, actually. I've done enough research on this topic. I kind of do. And the answer is, video games often don't come together until the end product is completely built out. And a lot of times that has to go through many different stages of refining and changing, because video games are not apps, they're games. And so unlike apps, which just have to be functional, games have to be fun. And so the more time you have, the more time you get to refine things. There's things that you'll hear Firefly talk about, which is another big coda of the game development, which is limitations breed creativity. Having limitations, time crunches, whatever, will breed ways in being more efficient and thinking about cutting the fat, just cutting everything you don't need, get rid of that shit, which is true. And there are many games that do much better under that time pressure. Other ones not, because not everyone's the same. And no two game studios are the same. But generally speaking, because of that, because there's not a structured reality, there's not a lot of flowing of information of exactly where everything is at one time. It's more of just kind of hanging loose while you're connecting live. It's kind of like, it's less like an organized rig where you're like, you zip tied all your cables together and you got everything else. It's like the tangled mess that is behind most people's computers when it comes to like all of the attachment points. You just attach a new point in there and it gets into the mess. And sometimes you have to go through and rip out all the parts and you have to kind of untangle it and put it back together, but it eventually gets messy again. So as a result, trying to describe that to your average backer or video game player, they have no fucking clue what you're saying, because they're used to seeing game announced 6 months it's out. They drop it in 2 months, or they start complaining about end game content, because that's the life cycle of a game to your average gamer. And while most of us have signed up for like the like behind the scenes sausage making, not all of it is visible or can be visible. There are some game studios that do it a lot better than Star Citizen does, in terms of like more monthly reports, more like detailed listings of like what they do. But those teams are usually like 30 to 40 people, and they all like work in a small space, not 600 people this big. So it's a trade-off. That's the reason why. That's a long way of saying I was talking about that. No, it's not that we players are too foolish to understand the process. People like to use a good term from Men in Black. A person is smart. People are dumb, panicking animals, and you know it. An individual person you can explain that to. Try explaining that to 2 million people who have accounts. And answering all of their questions, people who have different education backgrounds, different experiences, who have different personalities, different ways that they learn. Try to explain to 2 million people what I just said. There are people who are watching this on YouTube right now, typing angry comments in the comment section, talking about how I have no idea what I'm saying and that they know better than me, or blah, 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 because they didn't listen to me. Or because they can't, it's already in their head that this is the problem or this is the problem. That's the issue. And it becomes, don't say anything is the safest route. Only say what you know. And there's no point in releasing that information out there. Correction, most of us are signed up for the sanitized version of the sausage making. Seeing it unsanitized makes people freak out. Video games are games. Yes. Trying to nail gel to a wall. Basically, yeah. As an educator, I 100% know that no matter what I do, there's not every student I know is going to get everything I say. So I just hope to try to hit as many different types of learning as possible to get them. And even then, I probably will not get, there will be maybe a handful of students who I'll never get the handle of because of other issues, personal issues, family issues, health issues, possibly. And I can't like really deal with that. So I do the best of what I got and move on. And CIG is doing something similar. So I don't envy CIG. I just know that sometimes CIG doesn't read the room well. And that's their main problem. It's not necessarily a communication issue. It's a reading the room in terms of communication. And I think after a year of serious desync issues, they need to tell people where they're at. And if they don't know, they need to find out. Because you're releasing major content, which is very important and very critical, has very critical PvP elements to them. You need to fix the problems with PvP, which isn't really technical in terms of design side. It's technical in terms of the tech side. So I'm just trying to have temper my dreams for the game. Hey, Conti. But a little odd when people complain about events taking away from the game development. Hint, the events are 100%, the events are gameplay. Also, agile development encourages fast fail development culture. So bugs along with are to be expected. Yes. Rabble. Yeah, no, I agree with you, Nicholas. I think I also like to see the nitty gritty. And I'm lucky enough that I've had enough studio tours and I know people who work at CIG that I get a little bit of an insight in terms of the nitty gritty compared to most people. Not because of I'm special or anything like that. It's because I'm just stupid and put too much time and effort into this game. But it's fascinating to me too, just because I grew up in Techville, in the tech mecca of the world, Silicon Valley. At the time of the .com boom in the 90s and the early 2000s, like I grew up around computers. I had my first computer when I was like 8. So like computers I'm used to, and games I've been playing since then. So it's a little bit of that kind of stuff. All right, let's talk about the actual lore. The reason why y'all are here other than this. Help, I'm addicted to Adeptus Sororitas. Oh, you poor bastard, Cyber. They're a really good faction. The nuns with guns are fantastic. Do you think we'll later start seeing them flesh out the game? They probably release giga structures like the Ring World. Yeah, I think when they get I think CIG wants to go absolutely insane with this game when they add more stuff in the background. Events are test beds for curated content creation and refinement in addition to the interactions between the game systems. More events and more variety of events is a good sign in my opinion. It's what the game's going to be. Events are going to be the main draw of the game. Eventually they'll be automated so you don't have to deal with, they don't have to make them themselves, but that's part of the thing. It's like, it's literally the dynamic system that they're building, the dynamic economy. The events are part of that. So Silicon Valley, this explains a lot. I don't know if that's good or bad, John. I didn't grow up in Silicon Valley. I grew up in the East Bay, but I have a lot of family members and friends who, as anybody who, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, most people didn't live in Silicon Valley. They lived in, San Jose. Well, San Jose is really Silicon Valley, but, Concord, Berkeley, Oakland, Albany, El Cerrito, trying to remember the name of the stuff but lived on the peninsula, not in the city because no one lived in the city. They lived around the area and then commuted in. By the way, did I miss anything? I just got here from having dinner. Just a long talk because I mentioned that at the very beginning that I really hope CIG addresses the desync issue. We said that in the captain's table too. I think that's one of the major things they need to address is the desync issue. Now that they've addressed what they're planning on doing with events, which is good, they need to address the desync issue because it's the last real hurdle because they've done a really good job of dealing with the 30Ks in the latest patches. But they need to do more than that. Then someone said, why don't they, is their communication wrong? And I was trying to explain, like, it's not that their communication is wrong. It's just that sometimes they focus on the wrong angles to communicate with. And they've gotten better at it, but that was my whole tirade on that. And that's probably like 30 minutes of me talking. From what we saw, their cap ships look like flying staplers. No lie. Yeah, Xi'an, the Xi'an Empire. Do we know any details about the military, the details of the military, the Xi'an military? What the capital ships like? We know what their military is like. Their military is every male and female Xi'an. I don't know if they have multiple genders. They might, because like the Bennu don't have gender. But every male and female Xi'an must serve a 30-year service in the Emperor's army, in the Empire's army. They have to give up their names, and then they serve in the Empire, in the army. If they really like it or they're really good at it, they stay on, and then they can basically become professional soldiers. But they essentially adopt the family household of the Emperor while they're there. So they give up their names and become members of the Empire, of the imperial family, which is a big deal because houses are everything. Who your house is and who your house is loyal to defines who you are. Your family defines your entire status in Xi'an society. So being like almost literally the sons and daughters of the empire, of the emperor, pretty big deal. But it also means that if you are from house Poa and you meet somebody from house Gatak, you might be put in the same unit together. Even though you were raised in two competitive families, you're raised to fight alongside each other, or you're trained to fight alongside each other and live with one another, and you form a bond. And there's this thing called a kinship bond, which involves male and female Xi'an in big groups, often who they serve together in the service, and then when they get out, they still keep close ties. And they try to kind of stick close together. There's a lot of Xi'an romance novels that are about this kind of thing. So we know that the Xi'an actually have a very, very big standing army because it's the entire goddamn population. The entire citizens, all of the members of the Xi'an Empire have to serve in the military at some point. And there are trillions of them. Noodle and I talked about it in Captain's Table, but last time. But yeah, Noodle and I definitely saw that tweet from Noodle, and that's kind of what sparked my discussion about that. But in terms of capital ships, yes, let me pull up this real quickly for you guys so I can show you a Xi'an capital ship. These are no longer really canon necessarily, but here we go. I think this is the one I've seen more frequently. Oh no, it's really. Come on, there's got to be a better ship than this. Just say Xi'an ships, Star Citizen. Here we go. There we go. That's a much better size. Blow this up a little bit. All right. Hey, Craiklin. We're talking a little bit about lore. All right, so this is an early concept of the Xi'an capital ships. The whole concept of the Xi'an is that they tend to do vertical stuff. So everything they do tends to be in verticality rather than wide. So they tend to be boxy and that kind of thing. This is not necessarily the final stage of the Xi'an capital ships, but these are the kind of size. These on the side, these are supposed to be the Volper bombers. I think they're Volper, the Xi'an bombers. So this gives you kind of an idea of what a Xi'an capital ship is supposed to look like. Doesn't have enough thruster arms. This was early days. This is before a lot of the design philosophy of what the Xi'an are supposed to have was fully fleshed out. The Xi'an or Minmatar, yeah, very similar. Listen, I didn't meet the lizard people. The lizard people control all of time and space, Great Wolf. Looks like a set of brass knuckles, yeah. Again, these were early stages of their kind of concept of the Xi'an ships before they actually built any of them. So I expect something similar to this, but in the same design style as what you see with the Cartual, with the Santokyai, the Raylan, those sorts of styles. Exactly, yeah. This is very early. This is the earliest we've seen. This is the earliest of the early in terms of stages. Yeah, the desync they've talked about is they've talked about it in the patch notes, but they haven't really talked about it in terms of like an actual sit down discussion of what's causing it and how to fix it or how they're approaching it. I have a feeling that it definitely has to do with server rates issues, which I think they're trying to mitigate with the moving stuff off of the game server and moving it into the into a backend service. I think that's what they're hoping that it will do, and they're going to be doing some of that in the next patch, but we'll see. My God, it's hideous. The cargo ship will make a difference in trading over worlds. Yeah. Question: tell us everything you know about the Xi'an economy. All Xi'an companies are built all Xi'an products are built by individual houses. Each house, major or minor, feeds into another one. So you have some houses which are dedicated to things like farming or agriculture, and others that might be dedicated to manufacturing cloth, and then some who would be dedicated to making clothes. Now, the clothes making a house would probably have the highest status because everyone needs clothes. But all of the other smaller houses have to feed into the larger house. So they have to negotiate deals so that they can get their products. So they basically kind of like swear allegiance to the larger house to get their own products and help them. This is kind of a throwback to the old society that Xi'an had, where each individual house was fighting for supremacy on their homeworld. They had a very violent feudal society. And I mean very fucking violent. They almost genocided themselves, mostly by accident. And if it wasn't for the first emperor standing up and uniting all of the clans, all of the houses of the Xi'an Empire, they would have killed themselves. And so the empire is what stands in to regulate that. And so what the emperor did and what the imperial house would do is they would take that house structure and move it into economic sense. So each house was responsible for very specific economic things, and those things could change depending on the emperor's will. So the emperor gets to choose who can do what. And as a result, those other houses are going to have to swear allegiance to whichever greater house exists for them to exist. So they don't seem to have... They seem to have money in the same way that humans do with credits. But it's not necessarily... It's much more of a tightly controlled system. There doesn't seem to be poverty in the Xi'an Empire, but it doesn't seem to be legally illegal sort of thing. It's not like a socialist system. It's just expected that houses take care of each other. But you still have to use credits to purchase goods. So, or money to purchase goods and services. So it seems kind of like a feudal society with capitalistic elements and socialism in many ways. But all of the companies are regulated by the Xi'an Empire. So if a company decides that they're going to scam the shit out of the other Xi'an houses, they can lose their title and be sent off into oblivion or lose all of their standing, and another company can come in and take it over. Another family or another house can come in and take it over. So it is socialism in the sense of like the central government controls who can make what. It's actually more communism than socialism. But they still have free markets. It's just the government regulates everything in terms of what they can do. But generally speaking, they don't. It's more hands-off. Does that make sense? Those are people who run the TVA, yeah. The first Xi'an Emperor King, King Beyond the Wall confirmed, yeah. Where do sanctioned crime houses fit in? So, essentially, houses can apply for different positions. I can imagine there's not just one farming house. I imagine there's hundreds of farming houses, which would be the equivalent of like a big family land or a company farm. But there's only one clothing house. There's only one light ship manufacturer house. There's only probably one armor manufacturing house. So the big houses are the ones that matter, and all the little ones feed into the bigger ones, and they kind of compete over one another. It's like Chinese communism, yeah. It's ish, yeah. I would say it best reflects. It's probably the closest to something like socialism. But because it's super feudal, and I don't mean like one party state, I mean like feudal, like lords, ladies, kind of kings, queens, dukes, that kind of structure where big houses, you have leader, you have the king, you have the big houses, minor houses, everybody else. Xi'an family for farming houses, like this planetary system is dedicated to grapes. Yeah, like an entire planet would be dedicated to grape manufacturing. An entire planet would just make clothes. The closest thing to a Xi'an world, like a Xi'an factory world, is ArcCorp. And Xi'an even said like the ArcCorp is the closest they've seen to humanity of one of their factory worlds. However, on ArcCorp, there are hundreds, thousands, probably millions of different companies that make different products on ArcCorp. A Xi'an factory world has one product, or maybe a couple of associated products, but like a wood mill, but a planet wood mill, that kind of thing. And it is very much the will of the imperator or the emperor. Duke Turtleface and Lord of Beer, basically, yeah. It would. I'm trying to struggle to kind of, because it is very alien. Like China is the obvious like comparison because it's obvious they took huge inspirations from China. But I wouldn't say it's just China. Like that kind of simplifies it. It's a lot more nuanced than that, because unlike your typical communist country where like depending how you are favored in the by the current leader, then will determine your status. It sort of works like that, but the leader is 1,000 years old and you can't really kill them, because if you tried to assassinate the emperor, you would start a civil war and you'd probably get crushed by everybody else. That's why I say it's like very much a feudal system. There's another question about here. Let me say this. Feudal Japan? Probably closer to feudal Japan. Yeah. I would say it's similar to feudal Japan with elements of Persia. There's heavy elements of Persian, like kind of how they deal with their infrastructure and houses and stuff like that. So what's it like to date a Xi'an girl? Probably boring. Do Xi'an have super soldiers clad in great armor and no fear? They might. If there is one species that would have space marines in the Star Citizen universe, it wouldn't be humanity. It would be the Xi'an. AWS batch service on the roadmap will help a lot with desync. Okay. They also use energy differently as well. Yeah. With the design language of other ships, I don't think those the thing like that will actually look like. Yeah. Are you talking about the other ones? Question: Are more Xi'an companies houses that we know about other than Apoa and Gatak? No, not really. There is one, JL would be the person to talk to about this, but there is one which is that he's talked about, which is a clothing manufacturer, because they play a big role, because clothes aren't really used. As far as I understand, clothes are hand-me-downs. So you wear clothes based off of what your great-great-great-grandparents wore. So you're always being used. And there's actually a bit of a rebel movement going on inside. I don't mean rebel as in like overthrow the empire, but more like rebellious youth. And by rebellious youths, I mean like 100 years old. Oh, you're 150, you young man, kind of thing. Who show their rebellion against society by wearing different clothes, not normal clothes. This like a punk movie, yeah. Who are the Krathok, and are there another race fighting the Vanduul that humans have yet to come into contact with? The Krathok are an ancient species that has been fighting the Xi'an, for over 1,000 years, thousands of years by this point. They've been fighting what's called the Soul Wars for generations. And I mean, a Xi'an generation seems to be about 1,000 years old. So at least 2 generations. The Xi'an have not been doing well. Not well at all. They've been getting their asses handed to them pretty solidly. Like, it seems like the best the Xi'an can do is stop them, not attack them. And the Xi'an are the Krathok are not the Vanduul. We know that for a fact, because we know that the Xi'an fight the Vanduul, and the Vanduul don't fuck with the Xi'an anymore. The Spirit Wars. I said Soul Wars. Thank you. The Spirit Wars. Same thing. They can definitely infiltrate. He said the fact they call them Spirit Wars suggests something about the Krathok's abilities. I think they can infiltrate. They can definitely infiltrate because we know that they did a simultaneous assassination of the entire Imperial House in one day at the exact same second. In 1283 AD. When the Imperial House was spread out across the entirety of the Xi'an space. That is dangerously fucking crazy how insanely coordinated they are. We don't know if they're a different species or if they're a rogue faction. We don't know anything about them. And in fact, in lore, we don't know anything about them other than the Xi'an call them the Krathok. That's not what they call themselves. It's likely just what the Xi'an call them, because it's using the same kind of, the way that the Xi'an name things, the way that they're in their own language. So, Xi'an society can be understood as governmental concepts personified in the purest form. Yeah, that makes sense. And we don't know if there are other races fighting the Vanduul, but we don't know if there's any races that are fighting the Vanduul that humans have not come in contact with. The Tavaran have fought the Vanduul on their own and within part of the UEE. The Banu fight the Vanduul, and the Xi'an have fought the Vanduul to some degree. But like, other than humanity, the Banu have the longest border with the Vanduul. So, and they've known the Vanduul a lot longer than humanity has. We've been talking about the Xi'an mostly. If they infiltrate without being noticed, they have to at least look similar. Possibly, or at least have the ability to cloak themselves significantly. AI could pull off that kind of precision. Yes, which was my theory. My running theory is that the Krathok are either a species of AI that the Xi'an built themselves, and they're a giant shame to the Xi'an, or they're a rogue AI species that has kind of been on their own. Now, there's also some indication that the Krathok don't tend to assault Xi'an space. They don't seem to invade, because it seems like they've had plenty of opportunities when the Xi'an were at their absolute lowest to push their advantage, and they never have. Or didn't really. So it seems like there's something going on between the Xi'an and the Cathach, which is not on the level. And the Xi'an are very secretive because they don't like opening themselves up to outsiders because it reveals weaknesses they don't want to do. So the fact that they told us about the Cathach and what is a huge fucking like sign of trust. We went from like trying to murder them for hundreds of years to being friendly, and all those hundreds of years was less than a generation. It would be like over the span of a year, your neighbor constantly brandished guns at you, called you every name under the sun, and threatened to blow up your house. And then the next year, his wife, who had also done all those things, bashes him upside the head with a shovel and said, "We cool now, right? We cool? Can I come over and watch the game with you? Can we, you'd be a little weirded out." The fact that they're that okay with telling us of some of their secrets is a pretty big step. But then we just went and ruined their trust by trying to find the Cathach and talking with them. And they caught us and said, no, don't do that. Question, do you think it'd be a cool idea if they didn't want to meet us because they're actually a branch of humans? I'm not a fan of those sorts of deep lore situations, but I think it would be interesting. I'm thinking the Cathach are a subspecies of Xi'an that are aggressively fighting in separation from the Xi'an. Or hear me out, they're not a branch of the Xi'an that are aggressive. They're a branch of Xi'an that are democratic. That they're aggressive in the sense that they shun all of the cultural norms of the Xi'an. Whereas the Xi'an is tight and is very, very organized. They're more chaotic, where they're more structured and feudal. You'd have more loose confederate or democratic systems, more similar to the Banu or humanity than the Xi'an. And if you think about a Xi'an species, a Xi'an level of technology that is more democratic, I could see them being less likely to invade Xi'an space and more likely to just do terrible things to destabilize the Xi'an and protect themselves from the Xi'an. That's more of a CIA bullshit level of things. We're talking which alien species have access to cloning? Honestly, we don't know. Other than humanity, we have no idea. The Vulcans and Romulans, yeah. Would also give meaning to the Spirit Wars and how they're able to infiltrate. Yeah. The Cathach will likely be revealed to us via an incursion that breaks through Xi'an space at a time of the scheduled expansion and the details. I mean, I think we probably will see the Xi'an, the Cathach. I have a feeling that we will meet the Cathach, and the Cathach are going to kick our ass. Like, there's a couple of different threads that I see ending up in the longer, bigger picture, political picture of the Star Citizen universe. The Cathach are such a dangerous group that we find a system that has a border with a Cathach system. With a Cathach system. They find out who we are. We start talking with them. We decide that we're going to try to use them to try to pressure the Xi'an. They backstab us and nearly destroy the Empire. And it's only between an alliance between the UEE and the Xi'an Empire to push the Cathach that actually gets anything done. That would be a cool thread. The other one is the Vanduul aren't advancing; they're running, and whatever is chasing them is going to eventually reach UEE, and it'll be the UEE, the Banu, and the Vanduul might team up together to fight these invaders who've been pushing them out of their stuff. So these are all big story political ideas, which I'm sure are written in a napkin or in the back of some page on some lore notes that the writers have. That's like, yeah, we'll get to that when we get to that sort of situation. I think another storyline will be for sure, since they named them the Vandals. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The other storyline for sure, the Huns, whatever the Huns are. But, you know, the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the Vandals actually fought with the Romans against the Huns. They fought as mercenaries alongside the Roman Empire, or Roman soldiers. Vandals, which had raided and burned Rome only, you know, a generation before, were then teaming up with the Romans to fight the Huns. So that could be a thing. The Huns. I don't think they'll be that obvious about it, but. All right, so let's talk a little bit about each of the first contact situations, because not this last AISC, but the AISC before last, they talked a little bit about each of the different species. So I want to go into a little bit more detail about this. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Banu. Now, what you have to understand about the first contact with the Banu was it took place literally next to Earth. The system, I'm going to pull this up on screen because that's what I got access to, because this is helpful. So give you some visuals. All right. Full screen. All right. So let's turn on all these jump tunnels. Here is Sol, right? Now there are two jump tunnels. One's from Sol to Croshaw, and the other one is Sol to Davian. Now, here's the thing about the jump point to Davian. I believe it was Davian where it took place. Let me double check it because they may have changed it up a little bit. But yeah, because there's just no freaking way. The closest Xi'an, or the closest who's Xi'an? Because if I remember my lore correctly, it's Davian where the first, yeah. Which is way the fuck out there. It's probably changed since then. But the original lore, and I'll look it up real quickly to make sure I understand, I have this down. Yeah, Davian. So let me back out a little bit. So Davian is literally one jump from Sol. It might be they came from Cathcart, from Hades to Nemo to Corel to Genesis, or I don't even know how they got that, but because we know that Cathcart is definitely not a Banu system. I think these are the Xi'an systems, the green ones. Yeah. The Banu, yeah. So, in 2438, a man by the name of Vernon Tarr was a jumper, which is a profession that finds and charts jump points. And he was chasing down the signals of a new jump point in the region near Davian. And there he found another ship that he thought was trying to muscle in on his find. So he shot at it. He missed. And after he shot at it and missed, he was like, oh, that's not a human ship. That's an alien. Luckily, both the ships just stared at each other while Vernon Tarr called for a specialized group, a specialized task force, which had been set up in case of discovering sentient alien life by the UNE. They showed up. They take the alien into custody. They start analyzing the speech. The translators pick up that the people who are interacting with the say alien call him Jerry. But they managed to work out some very basic rudimentary greetings. They set up some buoys and message buoys near the location of the jump point that he came through. After a couple of days, the Banu showed up. A Banu fleet showed up. And the humans and the Banu started to negotiate. Eventually, everything was good. They went on their way. So, Vernon Tar almost killed the first alien he saw. Very human. Very on brand. But then it turns out that the alien, Jerry, the Banu that he'd shot at, was also running away because he was a fugitive. And so when his Suli found him, he became a hero because he introduced them to a brand new species, which is very rare in the Banu society, obviously, because they don't know very many species. And he became this huge celebrity. So Banu territory is such a weird expanse. It's such a weird thing entirely. Let's take a look at all of the Banu systems. So there are 4 systems: Bacchus, Gideon, Geese, and Ewan. This is possibly their homeworld of Geese. But there's also another one. Way up here, Trees. The only way you can get there is by jumping all the way through all these different systems to get there. And Yulin isn't even connected. There's only 5 systems that are Banu that we know of. And Banu don't really seem to keep secrets, but they also just don't seem to care sometimes. So, it wasn't too long before we realized that the Banu were very big traders. The thing you have to understand about the Banu, and I go over this a lot, but they're based around the Suli system. So a Suli is a family, it's a business, and it's an organization. You can think of a Suli like a corporation. Anyone can form one. They can be for whatever reason you want. And they're legally binding. But they can also dissolve pretty quickly, too. So it's life as if everyone was in a corporation. So everything is a negotiation. There's very little regard for things like history. Everything's about acquiring not necessarily material goods, but unique goods. Not necessarily valuable goods, but unique goods. So things that look unique, things that look shiny, they're like magpies. They like to collect things that look cool. They want to be the coolest people, the coolest species in the universe. That's kind of how the Banu work. They also really, really respect craftsmanship. So if they see something that's very well crafted, they want it. It doesn't matter if it's rare or if it's valuable. They want something that's really well crafted. So, for instance, the Banu celebrate when they watch sports, they celebrate sports. They don't celebrate winners and losers. They don't celebrate the teams. They celebrate the act of playing a sport because it is a reflection of all of the skills that all of the players have built up to go out with one another. For them, it's literally for the love of the game. That's why they watch sports. And it's unclear if they knew about sports or had their own concept of sports before humanity, but holy shit do they have a concept of sports now, because they love it. Doing both there, Raytheon. Why do the Vandal hate us so much? We don't really know. Banu were trading with the Devarin pre-human. We don't think so. I don't think they were. The Banu are the Devarin. If the Devarin had known about the Banu, they would have declared war on the Banu. We'll explain that when we get to the Devarin. I don't know what that means, Homuffin. Questions are from Joseph. Questions. So there wasn't any random sounds from space as the first indicator of the extraterrestrial arrival. It was literally we were flying around and bump into one. I know it's very rare. It's not really likely to happen in reality, but it was more done for the flair of the fact that Vernon Tar is a criminal. He's also an explorer, but he's also an outlaw. And it also turns out that Jerry, the Banu who they found, was also a criminal and an outlaw. Um, Nathaniel asks, since there are things like scratch walls and food fermentation devices on the Raylan, do you think that means alien AI crew will not be able to serve human or unhuman ships unless you have specific support for them, like food? No, you won't. Tavarin seem to eat similar foods to humanity, so it's not too bad. And Tavarin have been serving aboard human military ships for hundreds of years, so it's probably not a huge issue for the Tavarin. But for the Vandul and for the Banu, it might be. The Banu specifically have some foods that they can eat that are human, but most Banu food is literally toxic to humans. It will kill you. You don't know about the Vandul, but yeah, hey Raytheon. Yeah, we actually do. I do them both at the same time. Just because I just like, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I stream on Twitch Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Twitch.tv/theastropub. Those of you watching on YouTube, on Twitch, those of you watching on YouTube, I stream on Twitch. For those of you watching on Twitch, I also have a YouTube channel where I do lore stuff like this in a more refined manner, which is going to be coming out on, one of them's coming out tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. I was trying to get it done early, but I wasn't able to do so. So it'll come out tomorrow, which is youtube.com/theastropub. So just to take it for tomorrow in front of Popeyes. So yeah, so the Banu do have slaves. Now, the thing about the Banu slaves isn't really slavery as much as it's indentured servitude. It's complicated because the way they work is their entire society is based around contracts. So if you want to do something for somebody else, you can, but there's usually going to be some sort of reciprocity that they're expected to give to you. So everything is a negotiation. So if any time you're in Banu space and they ask you to do something for them, or you ask them to do something for you, they'll do it. There's a lot of Banu who are very friendly and will do anything you ask them to, but then they expect return. They expect something back. And if you can't give that back, well, guess what, motherfucker? You're going to have to work that off. It happens sometimes. In fact, if you read the original stories about the belligerent duck, Maz almost gets pulled back into servitude with his old Suli because of a negotiation. But Alex was able to weasel out of it, and kind of he gets out of it. So, or forced apprenticeship. It's not really. It's a lot more like their culture is based off of paying debts. It's very similar to the Ferengi. But the difference is that a Suli isn't just a company, it is a family. If you are part of a Suli, even if you're there because you're indebted to them, they will fucking kill for you. They will murder for you. They will drag that body out into the desert and bury it and never say a damn thing about it again. Sulis will fucking murder for their people. They are ride or die. You could just show up and be like, oh yeah, I'm a new member of the Suli. Congratulations, you are literally the best friend and their mother and their father and their son at the same time. It's just boom. So. Do you know what each races eat? I don't have a ton of research on each race, but I do know that the Banu eat very spicy foods and very, like onions and not like onions specifically, but like that kind of style of like garlic and onions, but also fermented. So it can get pretty off really quickly. Whereas the Xi'an eat rancid food because they're carrions. So they originally were scavengers. So a lot of their food is fermented in alcohol, but it's also like, it's like the closest thing that you would have would be raw, like I know Norwegians love their like really, really rotten fish. You know, stuff that's been like fermented, but also just left out. Similar to kimchi would probably be the closest dish that you would have a human dish that would be something that a Xi'an would eat. But like much higher. Lutefisk. Yeah, I guess something like lutefisk, yes. I don't know why that's still doing the whole, like, we're doing giveaways, because we're not doing giveaway right now. I mean, we are, but not that. Xi'an eat Asoyans. Yeah. What does Xi'an do with Asoyans' bodies? I don't know, but they're a delicacy. I want to think that they are as like a, they use them as like a marital aid, but I think that's wrong. I think they're just a delicacy. Aged steak. I left it outside for a week. You want some? Like that food from Iceland made from Greenland sharks. Yeah, similar to that. That's kind of how they work. And as far as I understand with the Banu, their food is similar, but it's much more like super on the spicy end, on the tart end of things. Oh yeah, they'd love a 1,000-year egg. Let me look up the details, because the Banu are the ones that I'm a little bit more shaky on in terms of their diet. We have heard of some things about them, though. Yeah, there's nothing really here about that. Yeah, nothing really here about them. I remember them talking about it, that like there's some foods you don't eat. There's a lore piece where like or Banu snack foods is a little different from human snack foods. You don't want to eat all of them. Don't get gangrene on the Xi'an crewmate. You think we'll end up with going to war with the Xi'an? Possibly low scale. Oh, did I remember Captain Slow, aka James Mary, eating those Icelandic rotten fish? I guess it depends on in-game events. I'm surprised they didn't make energy absorbing creature. They may, but it just may not be a sentient creature. I did watch ISC already. We're going to talk about it a little bit. UE smuggle the bodies to Xi'an to Stanton. To the Xi'an to Stanton. They said corrupt UE at least. Yes, they do. They sell them, definitely. Sell the bodies. We are humans. We'll go to war with anyone eventually. As long as there's money involved. Money or resources. Let me be right back. I'm going to take a quick bio break, but then we'll talk a little bit about the Xi'an, because they're the second species we encountered. All right. Maybe getting that sub to Stuart. There's no raffle going on, Sparks. We were in a Cold War. We're not really in them anymore. Are Banu and Xi'an ship technologies and aesthetically superior? Xi'an ships are technologically superior, slightly, but Banu ships are more of an amalgam of all the different best aspects of every ship. Humanity has been catching up with Xi'an very quickly. It's just actually a point of consternation by the Xi'an themselves, because they're afraid of a short-lived species like us, short-lived being 100, 200 years, being able to catch their long-lived species in terms of technological advances, because, you know, they're always paranoid. Since the Banu don't poop, does that confirm that a merchantman will not have a toilet? Banu don't poop? That's something I don't know about. But it probably will, because the Banu like to build ships with everyone in mind, especially if you're getting a Banu merchantman, you're probably going to be getting one that's converted for human use. Question: do you think they will expand the aliens that are at war with the Xi'an to make it how Elite did and hide them to be found? Oh, like the Karthok? Possibly. I mean, yeah, but I mean, that's talking like years down the road, though. I can see the Xi'an shooting first, though. They seem the type. It depends. The Xi'an they tend to be that type of, they tend to live by the motto of the best war to win is one you don't have to fire a shot. And of course, the Xi'an are not a monoculture. There's not all the people of Xi'an who believe in the one thing. They'd like you to believe they do, but they definitely don't. There's definitely like conversations inside Xi'an society whether or not to trust humanity, to open up to humanity. Some people wanting to use it as a means to get better control over humanity. Other people saying we need to adopt some of the things that humanity have done. Others who say you can't trust a human. Those sorts of kind of arguments. And the same arguments are happening in human space by the same thing, because we fought a 200-year Cold War against them and don't tend to trust them. Are there translators in lore, if we meet Banu, etc., that will translate them to fly in the game? That's the plan, I think. But we don't know exactly how that'll work. They haven't decided. They haven't kind of made that up yet. Are there any intelligent non-humanoid alien species? There was one that nailed themselves, destroyed themselves. And there's a couple, I think, that are intelligent but not spacefaring. Like early Stone Age. Like the Osoians, maybe. I can't remember exactly, but there's some of the intelligent life that has some rudimentary intelligences which are not humanoid. But to be quite frank, the reason why there's all of the intelligent species are humanoid is because this is a video game and it makes it a lot easier to to build ships for these species that you can also then sell to players that have, you know, human proportions. The Hadesians, yes, were the ones who wiped themselves out, but I think the Osoians are the ones who are the ones that are kind of super primitive. The Hadesians are semi-humanoid. They seem to have like a humanoid upper body with two arms, but their main lower body was like a thorax with like 6 to 8 legs. So, does the UE have anything equivalent to NASA's planetary protection protocols or the Prime Directive? Yes, it's called the Fair Chance Act. The Fair Chance Act was passed in 2795, I want to say. They've updated it ever since. But it basically says that we have to protect and protect from contact and from interference with species which may become sentient and do not terraform their lands. So yeah, there's actually there's a whole story about why that came to be, and it involved the overthrow of a government. So, do we think we'll be able to visit some of those non-space? Oh yes, definitely. You'll definitely be able to visit those non-spacefaring species. 100%. Is there any lore between the first contact between the Banu and the Xi'an? The Xi'an haven't said anything, and the Banu don't keep history, so no. What type of alien crew are you most looking forward to working with? Banu. They're just awesome. Will CIG give us cat girls? Possibly. Sorry if I missed this as I joined the stream. Will we have the option to play as any other species other than human? That's planned. Now, when I say it's planned, I mean Eric Wingman Peterson said this back in 2013 or 2014 as an off-the-cuff remark during a live stream, almost 10 years ago, that if they were ever to do a paid expansion, a DLC, that would cost more than the actual base price of the game, it would be for playing as alien species. That is almost a direct quote from Wingman from back then. Does that mean it's still going to happen? That was a long time ago. And it wasn't an official decree. It was just a comment. Do I think they'd like to? Yes. Do I think they will? Probably. And I think they'll probably still sell it as a DLC. Because in terms of the context, it makes a lot of sense how to incorporate it. But in terms of will they for 100% should confirm? I don't know. Do you think you'll be able to visit some of those? Oh, yes, this. Is there any lore on Furke? What type of Origin 404 soon? Maybe. What did Conti say? I really hope they don't do that outside and add-on single-player game. I think that's the kind of like Aliens to be Alien. I would see that, especially if the game is fully developed and fleshed out, for them to do something like that, to just add an additional feel to it, just kind of give it a different twist on the game. And I think if they were going to do it, this is likely how I would see them doing it. Now, I could be completely wrong on this one, but this is the way it would make sense, both technologically and in terms of narrative. The first species they would probably release to be playable would be a Tavaran. Because Tavaran are already part of the UEE. They're a common sight in the UEE. They're not an abnormal species. So everything that's in human society is also built around having Tavaran work with them as well. So Tavaran have to have similar... They have to be able to sit in the same kind of seats that humans are, use the same armor and weapons that humans are. So it's not too difficult to think of the Tavaran being an easy add-on. It's just a different skin for a player, essentially. And they're about the same height as humans too. So, and then you have from the Tavaran, you would have the Banu and the Xi'an. I don't think you'd ever play as a Vanduul, but I think you might be able to play as a Banu or the Xi'an as its own single release well down the line from there. Mine's going good there, Magnet. How's yours? I think it's more like the UNNC and Halo. Roughly how colonized is the galaxy in Star Citizen? Is it more ED levels of bubble or more 40K? Okay, so to describe the colonization of human systems, let me turn back to the map. So, here is, let me turn off the Banu, the Vanduul, the Xi'an, and the developing systems. Let's keep the developing systems on there. Okay, so you see all of these systems here? These are all systems that have some human presence in them. It's a lot of systems, more than any other species currently. That just doesn't mean that the Xi'an don't have them. There's probably much more this direction that we don't see. But you also know if I turn off the unclaimed systems, and the developing systems, there are very few of those in comparison. There's still a lot, probably more than those of the two combined, but these are all different levels. Nexus is a more recently controlled one, which is incredibly unstable. Ellis is super controlled and super like core world sort of situation. Killian is about the same. Magnus is kind of a rough frontier. It's developed, but it's not super frontier. Stanton is where we are now. Terra is super core world. Tyak and Baker, I don't know really. I know Baker used to be a military hub. So, Kiel is a military hub. Goss is similar. Helios and Charon are both kind of. Charon's actually in the Civil War right now. So like a lot of these systems are core to fringe worlds, especially like Bremen and Castra and Tohill and Oya. These are all, and Horus, these are all very fringe, undeveloped to low developing systems, which aren't fully integrated into the UE. They may have representation in the UE, but they're not fully they're not Earth. They're not completely terraformed or they may be terraformed, but they're not completely developed. So if you add these two developing, let's just turn off the other systems. You see there's not an insignificant amount of developing and unclaimed systems. So what happened is that as humanity was pushing out into the stars through these jump points, they made a quick decision, usually over the course of one or two surveys of a system, if the system was worth developing or not. If it was not worth developing, they would move on. They would just abandon it. But as a result, because the UNE and then the UPE and eventually the UEE just ignored these systems, they became meccas for outlaws and for people who didn't want to live inside human society. So almost all of these systems have a human presence. They're just not officially UEE systems. So you have this weird dichotomy where Cathcart and Hades are literally in the middle of the fucking empire. Cathcart has a goddamn jump point to Davian. It's 2 jumps away from Seoul. But it's also the pirate headquarters. It's just because it didn't have a lot of value, it was used as a dumping ground, as a mothball place for old capital ships. And when they eventually just kind of stopped paying attention to those regions, because again, there was no real value to them, by the time the government become aware of what's going on in Cathcart, it was too late. The pirates had taken all of the ships and put them together into a giant space station, and it became a nightmare to try to remove them. So they just ignored them and quarantined them. Tried to use, what is it called? Containment strategies to stop them from coming out. It doesn't really work because it's difficult to fully control them. But so you have this kind of weird situation where not every system is developed in the same way, and some systems are entirely abandoned, but are still inhabited. They just aren't lawful. So I would say it's similar to 40K, but I've never seen a kind of a universe like this where entire systems are just left alone because they just have no value to the government. It would be like the U.S. saying the entirety of the Mojave isn't U.S. because it's just desert. There's no point in having it there. So it's not sovereign land. So does that make sense? Question, do you think that given the Tavaran former culture, there will be any focus on melee combat? I really hope so. Like a Klingon Batleth or the Vulcan Lirpas. I'd like to see the Tavaran get their spears, which are seen in their concept art. I'd love to see Tavaran spears. I'd also love to see humanity bring to have boarding axes or swords, and to have shields, to have like boarding shields, because I can charge the distance with a ballistic shield with an axe in my hand down a corridor before you can reload. So the idea of using melee weapons in tight spaces in a spaceship makes a lot of sense. And historically thinking, if I hit the side of a spaceship, I'm much less likely to rupture a hole in that spaceship with an axe compared to a bullet. So it's a lot easier to not have hull breaches with melees. So I would love to see that. I'd love to see melee weapons be a thing in Star Citizen. What's the protocol for negotiating alien races to determine the control of a system? There's no space equivalent of the UN or Sykes-Picot, is there? There is nothing like that, there is some agreements that have been made between various species. Essentially, the way that the Xi'an and humans kind of deal with it is whoever finds the species, finds and records the planetary system first, will get claim ownership of that system. And it's usually, depending on where the originating explorer came from, that will determine who gets the system. For instance, a Banu from the Banu Protectorate found the Tamsa system. But because he found the Tamsa system through a UEE system, he gifted it to the UEE. And the UEE allowed him to name it. He named it Tamsa after Tamsa Wheel, who was a famous artist that he really liked. Did art through math. So, but yeah, it's the black hole system. It was discovered by a Banu, gifted to humanity. So it really seems to be who finds it first and where did they come from when they found it. So if like a Xi'an trader was going through human space and then accidentally found a jump point, that jump point, that location would probably fall under the jurisdiction of the UEE, not the Xi'an Empire, even though the Xi'an were the ones who found it, because it depends on where their point of origin is. That's the closest we've seen to any kind of interstellar law regarding who has what ownership. But it's a contentious issue. There's a lot of negotiation that has to go on between the various species who claim ownership, and it damn near started a war. Speaking of which, let's talk about the first contact with the Xi'an. First contact with the Xi'an. I'm going to look this up exactly so I can get the dates, but it wasn't too far after the Banu. $25.30. So the first one was $24.38. So about, I guess that was a little bit further. About 100 years after first contact with the Banu, humanity encountered the Xi'an. Now, this one's a little weird. So let me get to that point. $25.30 is the middle of a gold rush or a land rush for systems. The second a system is discovered, most companies are pushing into a system to try to claim it for their own company. Because if they can push into an area and terraform a planet before anyone can stake claim on it, if they are the first ones to terraform it, they actually get ownership of the planet. So many systems, many companies are pushing into systems before they're even surveyed, after they've been discovered, to stake claims and just kind of roll the dice. One of these companies is Gaia Planetary Service, or GPS. They tried to set up operations in what the Xi'an call the Thusung system. They entered the system illegally. They weren't allowed to be there. They had no legal authority by the UPE at the time to be there. They didn't do any surveys they were supposed to. And they started to try to terraform the planet. But as they're terraforming the planet, these aliens show up and point guns at them. Fun fact, the Xi'an's homeworld was destroyed in a terraforming accident. So you can imagine the first contact with humans trying to terraform one of their worlds didn't go over so well. The entire crew was held prisoner, except for one, who was sent back to go get authorities from humanity. He brought humans came in full force with a full fleet, and the Xi'an were there with a full fleet. And after 57 days of negotiation, eventually those who were involved in the terraforming project were released back to the UPE, and essentially both sides were just like, Yeah, let's go. Let's go. Don't you back off. You back off. We'll back off. We'll just both back off. So yeah, humanity didn't do the best job at first contact. Since then, humanity didn't do a very good job of negotiating and talking with the Xi'an. The Xi'an, the Xi'an were very much a already distrustful species, and they really didn't trust humanity. And shortly after this, in 2542, only 12 years after the first contact with the Xi'an, another explorer bumps into another species. Now, this species seems to have mastered spaceflight. They have significant infrastructure in their systems, but they don't either seem to know about jump point technology or terraforming technology. And this researcher is simply observing from afar at first. He then gets a little bit too close, gets noticed by these aliens, and then runs away. He goes back to the Idris system, where he had come from, and records. It might have been the Elysium system. No, not Elysium. Where are you? The Centauri system. Might have been the Centauri system. Anyways, he goes back to the Centauri system and files his report with the UEE, or the UPE at the time, that they discovered a new species that was sentient, that is spacefaring, all these sorts of things. Here's the problem. He led them back to the jump point, so they knew a jump point exists. What he didn't know is that the species already knew that jump points existed, because they had actually explored jump points and had set up an off-system colony. But now they knew that there was a jump point directly into this other species, the first other species they'd ever run into that weren't themselves in terms of sentience. And already having a problem with overpopulation, overexerted resources, and a people who were about to go to war with one another, the leader of this group decided that they were going to relieve that tension by declaring war on humanity. And these were the Tevarin. The Tevarin have always been a warlike species to their core. And the thing that brought them together was the warlord, which this all-encompassing strongman leader who would keep them together and kept the peace. And while the Tevarin expanded dramatically, they technologically advanced, militarily advanced. All of these great advances happened because they were together. They were ripping apart at the seams because they were too tight. There was overpopulation was a problem. And I know overpopulation being a story it's more of a resource taxation issue, and also cultural buttings of heads. There's actually some studies recently about within the last 30 years or so that talks about how physical space isn't really an issue. It's societal space. Having a place where you can privately be away from the rest of society is very important for our mental health. So think of it something like that. A warlike species who hadn't fought any wars, living on top of one another because they lived on top of mountains rather than in valleys, you're going to kind of get pissed. So to release that pressure, they declared war on humanity to try to take their lands. That didn't end up going so well for them, but it did go well for them early on because they had better shield tech than we did, and they kicked our ass. The Tevarin absolutely demolished us early on. Because, remember, we talked about how humanity and the Xi'an nearly declared war on each other? Well, guess where all the military was for the last 12 years? Not near the Tevarin systems, but near the Xi'an systems on the other side of the empire. Well, the other side of the territories. So they had to mobilize, pull back away from the Xi'an systems, and defend themselves. By that time, they'd already lost Idris. They were pushing into Centauri, and they were pushing into Pharaon. It was bad. just in general, shit was bad for humanity. And if it wasn't for Ivar Messer, who helped basically salvage the almost failed invasion of Idris, the liberation of Idris, humanity may have not be around right now. But eventually, humanity pushed back and conquered the Tevarin. And I mean conquered them, causing a diaspora to spread. Many of them spread across the entire galaxy to try to find their own ways. Ira Messer eventually becomes very popular because he's the war hero, gets elected High General. Here's the thing that a lot of people who don't really read the lore misunderstand is they go, how did he go from colonel to general in just a couple of years? Because it's an elected governmental position. So he was elected High General, became the head of the military alongside the High Secretary, who was the head of the legislative and governmental branch, the bureaucracy, and the High Advocate, who was the head of the judicial and the judicial system and the police enforcement system. Eventually, he would subvert all of them, declaring himself the first citizen, eventually Imperator, and would form the UEE. In his first acts as Imperator, he would first blame the Xi'an for terrorist attacks, which he actually caused. Then proceed to damn near go to war with the Xi'an over a faulty sensor that he poured billions, trillions of credits into, that still didn't work and exploded and nearly caused a war between humanity and the Xi'an. Yeah, Messer had good intentions, but man, that man was stupid. Good intentions, still a dictator. Hey, Cannibal, how you doing, buddy? I'm not gonna lie. The Tevarin remind me a lot of the Sangheli from the Halo series. It's not a bad thing in my opinion. The honor-bound warrior race is something I fall in love with every time. It's important to remember that the traditional sense of like the mythical Bushido code, the whole like I'm going to kick you awake and give you a sword and then we'll fight. That never existed, in history, but none of the species in Star Citizen are like that. Not the Vanduul, not the Tevarin, not the Xi'an. They will stab you in the back if they can, but their sense of honor has to more do with their own personal sense of courage and their own personal sense of morality. It's, which difference from this kind of stuff. No raffles there, guys. Allegedly caused a false flag. It's definitely a false flag. We have historical records that prove it. Which is actually cool. Oh, I haven't done any retweets. I haven't done any of that. I just kind of jumped in. So, as a result, humanity and the Xi'an have not so good relations for most of between 2530 and 2780s, when humanity secretly, or I should say, the senator from Terra secretly negotiated a peace treaty with the Xi'an. A kind of an initial ceasefire treaty, one that had never been signed by either side before. And it was brought before the Senate, and the Senate approved it. And the Imperator at the time, Imperator Linton Messer, said, fuck you, I'm not signing that. Because the Messers had been using for hundreds of years the threat of the Xi'an attack as being like, you need us. This would help lead to the fall of the Messers. Because this combined with footage which showed the uncle, no, brother-in-law, I think it was brother-in-law of Linton Messer, the company of the brother that was owned by the brother-in-law of Linton Messers, terraformed a world called Garan 2. And it eradicated a sentient species. They knew a sentient species was there. They were like Stone Age, but they knew they were there. They didn't care. And they caught it all on camera. And rebels found this footage and proceeded to broadcast it over the entire empire. shit went bad after that. Between actively stopping peace with the Xi'an when the Xi'an proved that they wanted, a detente was already on the table, and the emperor said no. Rampant corruption and the popularization of the death of Anthony Tanaka, who was just a kid who didn't want to work a triple shift in a factory and was assassinated on the factory grounds, and that was also broadcasting entire empire. And now they're just genociding species. Yeah, that ended the Mezzer regime pretty quickly. At that point, nobody wanted to deal with the Mezzers because they just gone out off the chain. So, things didn't go well for the Mezzers after that. We're at peace, but don't tell anyone. It's a secret. So is humanity sort of loosely ruled by the Xi'an? Not really. That's definitely what the centralists would like you to think. Question. Does this mean that the Varan are the only air breathers besides us? As far as I understand, the Xi'an and the Banu also breathe oxygen. They probably breathe similar mixtures of oxygen or similar mixtures of atmospheres that we do, but probably not exactly, because terraforming is not just changing the composition of the atmosphere, but also changing the temperatures and the it's everything from the atmosphere to the magnetic fields to even the ground itself. Terraforming is a long process that's more of an art than anything else, and involves many different processes, which are all different depending on which system you look at. So, yeah, like what we breathe is only like 20% oxygen. So, like humans can live in different mixes. We can live in 100% oxygen environments. We can also live in high hydrogen or helium environments as well. It really depends on what we have. So, I think it's very similar. I don't think a Xi'an would necessarily be comfortable on Earth, but they could live on Earth. I don't think a human would necessarily be comfortable on a Xi'an planet, but they could live there. Wasn't it the mine on Nyx, which there was a statue? Yes, it was. It was Levski has a statue of Anthony Tanaka. Yeah. How much lore is there released already? There's a ton of lore. There is the thing about the lore, which is on to kind of think about, is that the lore is not written in a textbook form. Like, this is the event that happens, this is who are involved, the who, what, when, why, where kind of format. You don't really see that a lot in Star Citizen. A lot of the lore is placed into the history of ships, or the history of companies, or an event, or sprinkled through story elements, or if you want to know about the lore, there are two language guides, the Xi'an and the Banu guide, both of which are like 90 pages long, and about half of them are just lore. Just context for the language that you're speaking, that talks about things like Banu culture, Xi'an culture, and how their languages work. Like, for instance, the Banu don't have genders. They don't have a concept of a gender. I don't know if that means they don't have, the concept of biological sex. I don't if they have two distinctive biological sexes. I don't know. But their language doesn't have gender. It just doesn't exist. There are no such things as gendered words in their language, which is a bit you wouldn't know unless you read the language guide for the Banu. So it's not in a typical like Wikipedia article style. It's spread out amongst many different articles, some of which are really old, some of which are more recent. I would say if I sat down and went through all of the lore to piece together the information, I would say I could probably produce in detail between 100 and 200 hours of content in a video form, an audio form. Easily. There's a lot of lore. It's just not fully there. Some of the stuff may not be fully fleshed out yet. And some stuff is more nebulous because they haven't gotten to that system or that element of the game or whatever. So. That sounds right, Son of Midgard. 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.9% argon, 0.4% carbon dioxide. But humans can live and have been proven to live in various different atmosphere compositions. As long as we have oxygen, but like high helium environments are often used in deep sea diving, if I remember correctly. For some reason, I don't remember exactly why. Early space missions used 100% oxygen environments. So there are, which is dangerous, cause the Apollo 1 fire. But, you know, so there's different oxygen compositions that humans, or the atmospheric compositions that humans can live in. It's just, the atmosphere is one thing, pressure is the big one. Lore for unreleased content is tentative, yeah. Are human languages without grammatical gender too? Not too weird. That's true, but very rarely, like most languages, I can't even think of any languages that don't have some sort of gendered nouns or pronouns in them in terms of like distinct. Like there's just the concept of a gender doesn't exist. So. Helium's used because nitrogen can be absorbed by the blood. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Sorry, that ship, yeah. Lore and concept art will always kick out far ahead of the game, yeah. And CIG has several productive lore writers. They have 4 writers who are working on lore all the time. One of which is also an archivist, Sherry, and Sherry is the one who updates the Galactipedia and basically puts all of their stuff together into formats. But she also writes for them as well. They have a main writer, they have a lead of narrative, and they also have a lead story writer, and then they have the archivists. But yeah, they all work together. They may even be watching this right now. Get back to work. I'm watching all of you. They don't. Who am I kidding? They don't watch me. If they did, they'd probably be ripping their hair out because they'd be like, "You screwed this up, Paul. Why did you screw this up? That's not what I wrote, Paul." And for that, I would say death of the author. Sherry's also the lore language expert, other than Game of Thrones guy who invented them. Yeah. Question: if you could add an alien race from another IP of race, what would you bring? To Star Citizen? What are the giant? They're from Mass Effect. They're the jellyfish that speak like angrily. Blah 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 blah. The ones that don't like have concepts of emotion, or they do, but it's very different. Hanar, yeah, the Hanar. I'd bring the Hanar into Star Citizen just because the Hanar are crazy. That's interesting to know that, Solness. Turkic, Mongolic, Uralic, and some Iranian languages don't have gendered nouns. That's interesting to know. Reapers. Blasto, that's what I'm thinking about. The first Hanar Spectre, Blasto. Did Star Citizen get their Vanduul inspo from StarCraft Zergs? I don't think so. The Vanduul seem more inspired by a combination of the Kilrathi and the Goa'uld. They're kind of a mishmash of a bunch of different species. They're more reptilian than the Zerg. They're definitely not hive mind either, but they definitely have that Kilrathi honor sense. So Yeah. And for those, everyone says, but the Kilrathi were cat people. Yeah. So were the Vanduul originally. There's a lot of hints from early stuff, early releases from CIG that Star Citizen wasn't supposed to be Star Citizen. It was supposed to be Wing Commander Privateer 3 or 4 or whatever, kind of like a freelancer meets privateer MMO. And that Squadron 42 was supposed to be Wing Commander, 5. I can't remember which one that Chris stopped at, but there's a lot of hints at that. But it never really accumulated, so. I don't know about aliens, but I would love to see see Reavers. I don't know. Oh, Reavers from like Firefly? Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Star Citizens needs Gungans. Yes. Zerg are a re-engineered species that the hive mind incorporated into the hive, that they have beneficial physiology. Yeah. This is really fun, yes. So bored. Star Citizen needs Hypnotoad. All glory to the Hypnotoad. So let's talk about the Vanduul. So the Vanduul were first discovered in, I think, the 27th. No. Yes, 27th century. August 9th, 2681. All contact with the Dell Township is lost. A group of advocacy agents are sent in to figure out what happened. They think it's a pirate raid. But all 638 people have been killed in the settlement. And there is one missing body. They think that initially the outlaws were responsible. But on September 15th, 2681, the UE military encountered their first Vanduul clan. Because the Vanduul do not operate under a unified government, the UE was both unable to directly retaliate and to seek establish diplomatic relationships. But it became pretty clear after that. In fact, at least September 15th, 2681 may have not actually been a successful attack. They may have not killed the Vanduul. So humanity soon realized that the Vanduul were not one mono species, but like one culture, but various different types of clans. And the first clans that entered human space specifically in Orion, the Orion system, got their asses kicked. Like, holy fuck. Like, we were just beating them like drums. It was so easy to kill them. They came in small ships, maybe a few bigger ships here and there, but humanity sent in a goddamn Bengal and a full fleet when they first saw these raiding aliens. And it was a slaughter, to the point where they had to, like, the UEE was actually thinking about removing its fleet presence in the area and just hiring mercenaries to do the job for them. And because the mercenaries were doing a good fucking job killing the Vanduul. And it wasn't until a couple years later that a Vanduul fleet showed up at the worst possible time, when the Bengal at the center of the battle group that was at Orion had been called away to deal with an insurrection on another planet. So all that was left was some, as far as we know, destroyers, maybe some battle cruisers, probably some Perseuses, and some Idrises. They actually held their own pretty well early on. This huge, much bigger fleet with much bigger ships showed up. They were able to fight them off. The Vanduul did start invading Orion, but between the mercenaries and the the Navy and the Marines and the Army on the ground. They were able to push back the Vanduul and hold them off. And then a kingship showed up. Biggest ship anyone had ever seen shows up and annihilates the remains of the UEE fleet. Orion falls. People panic and evacuate. This begins a process over several years as the measures slowly go more and more insane, that the Vanduul began to attack a territory. Now, they didn't push out of Orion initially. It would take them several years before they would push again. But when they pushed again, they pushed hard. And they conquered like 3 systems in one go and were stopped by a group that I've already talked about in the past called the 216, I think. Squadron 216, the Black Crows, were able to help stop the tide and defend the retreating humanity. But we lost like 4 systems in that push. And ever since then, humanity has been in kind of an on-again, off-again conflict with the Vanduul, trying to stop their advance rather than push back. And it's only very recently when they tried to attack and invade Vega system and lost in 2945, only like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that humanity finally declared war on the Vanduul, mustered its forces, and started to try to push back against them, try to the idea of being maybe possibly reconquering the systems that they lost. So, but we don't know a lot about the Vanduul. We know that they are clans. We know that they harvest planets. They seem to just mulch up everything they can get in a system, and then turn all of that bio waste or biomaterial and organic and inorganic material into various compounds that they use for their fleets, to build new ships and to repair their ships, and as food. These massive ships called harvesters, which I think are like cruisers or something like that, are that just drop onto planets and just mulch everything in sight. It's pretty horrendous. Yeah, weird how the Warcraft world lore is so good, but Blizzard can't tell a story to get out of a wet paper bag. They tell some decent stories. Warcraft 3 was a pretty good story, but yeah. I'm curious in the future when they randomize events in new systems, however long that takes, if we'll see lore being written based in player responses to the system, kill, spare, help. Yes, that's the plan. The plan is that those actions will be recorded and eventually will cause other things, and the writers will then pick an interesting kind of way that would turn out, and then they would make that as more of a handcrafted lore piece compared to the randomized events that they happen. Hey, Captain Burks. Welcome, everyone, from Burks' stream. My name is Paul, Berserker01, Batman Shelley. Welcome to the office hours. We're talking about alien lore. We're talking a little bit about the updates. We don't make new anymore. We just make remasters. For those of you who are watching on Twitch and YouTube, especially those of you watching YouTube later, you should go follow Captain Burks. He's a fantastic content creator. How you doing, Perchy? Warcraft 4, not Wing Commander 4, which is released. BF4 tonight was great. I'm glad to hear that, man. Yeah, I'm interested in getting. I heard that Battlefield 2042 is actually not going to be. It's going to be $60 on PC. So I was like, okay, that's fine. But yeah. I think something happened like Elite Dangerous, the commander who killed the. Okay. Oh, question. Is there anything in the lore about aliens with some sort of space magic, i.e. biotics, the Force, or the Bene Gesserit from Dune? No. No, Star Citizen tends not to have space magic. There are some mysterious species, though, like the Hadesians, who may have had something like that. But if they did, it wiped out their entire species. So, I think something like that happened in Elite Dangerous. The commander who killed the target got into the lore. Commander Harry Potter. Oh, yeah. We talked about that last time. Last Captain's Table. About how Harry, about that idea. But yeah, there's been discussions. The example they used was, if you were the player who killed the Dread Pirate Roberts, then you would get, you would be written into lore as the person who killed the Dread Pirate Roberts. That was something, the idea that they had on mind. So, the Blue Man, maybe? Yeah, maybe the Blue Man. Man, I'm hoping Theaters of War, but they got to get this desync issue solved before we get into that. As you know for sure, the desync is just killer. I'm really surprised. I'm really happy. Let's move on from here. We'll keep asking questions about the aliens and such like that, but that's kind of the extent of the aliens, the sentient aliens in Star Citizen. We have okay relations with all of them but the Vanduul. We're currently at war with the Vanduul, so a little different. Isogen, it could easily, depends on how big it gets. Neither is a combat ship, so it won't re-refactor in place like it usually is. Oh, Isogen asks, do you think the Banu Merchantman will become more expensive than the Carrick? I think they'll both go up in price over time. Interesting what happens. You know, if they can release, get a release of Squadron 42 in the future and then focus on the Star Citizen, I'd love to see some weird horror and biotic stuff added to the massive lore update. As a massive lore update. I don't think they will. Like they're going for a specific vibe, and having like biotics in the similar way of like Mass Effect doesn't really jive with that. They like go horror though, I think, but I think you're probably looking for more something aliens versus Mass Effect. Have you asked some of the other races how they deal with the Vanduul? Yes. The Xi'an have very passing experiences with the Vanduul, but they just crush them. We also don't know, like the Xi'an fleets are huge. They're massive. So they probably, one of their fleets is probably bigger than the entire human navy. It's just that big. The Banu either fight or trade with them. The Devaran have fought them multiple times, led defenses against them, but, the Devaran aren't exactly an expansive species anymore. Super Mystery Forerunner, big bads chasing Vanduul, yes or nah? Probably not, but probably Huns. Probably some sort of big bad who are badder than the Vanduul, but not big bad. We'll see, though. After Squadron 42, there'll be such group. So, Ash, here's the thing. I've heard this before, and people get despair about that. There's a difference between Squadron 42 Chapter 1 and Squadron 42 Chapter 2. The difference is you don't have to build a brand new game for Squadron 42 Chapter 2. You just have to build, you don't build new tools or new art or anything else like that. You can take a lot of the same assets that were used to make Squadron 42 and Star Citizen and make a new game. Making a sequel to Squadron 42 is going to be a lot easier than making Squadron 42 itself, because there's a lot of process of building the engine that Squadron 42 runs on, also Star Citizen runs on, rather than just assets. And once you get beyond the engine and the fundamentals, they can just produce assets. And as CIG has proven, at least with mining, they can do assets pretty quickly if they have the engine done. But, oh, ye of much faith. It's not even just about a faith. It's just the how every game is developed. It's called efficient use of materials. So the Devaran were assimilated fully into the UEE? Mostly. They're definitely still a second-class citizen to many people in the UEE, but they do participate in the UEE. There are Tevaran senators. There are Tevaran in the military. But not all of them are there. There's some, like humans, who have lived in their own worlds. There's a collective of Tevaran that live in. Let's see where the actual location is, because it's not too far away. In the Branagh system, and it's kind of this dead world. This is a large collection of the Tevaran. There's many Tevaran settlements that exist. Every game that isn't headed by Mr. Chris. Well, Squadron 42 is headed by his brother, so we'll see that. And the thing that I just said wasn't even something that is just from my mouth or hope. That's exactly what Aaron Roberts said, is that he's hoping to take the framework that they build with Squadron and then build more games after that, which is what he and his team did with the Lego games. Once they built the basic engine, it was just reskinning it and working on the gameplay to improve upon those. Because people forget that Aaron Roberts and a lot of people at CIG built the Lego games. Yeah, lots of things change over time. Saying that just because he got a date wrong, everything he says is wrong is a little bit of an overestimation, FTR, even for you. I'm sure you at one point said something that wasn't true about Star Citizen that became true. Would we not trust anything you say? Really, he built? Yes, he personally built the Lego games. No, him and his team did, though. Yes, a lot of his team came from that studio that built the Lego games. I can't remember the last one they built, but you can look them up. Hey, Star Killer. Then don't fix it. Just look at the US B-52s. Is there an explanation why old ships are still being used? Like the Retaliator was in the first of Iron War. That was 100 years ago. Where was the technological innovation? I can tell you this: the Retaliators of the first of Iron War are not the same Retaliators of 2951, because technology marches on. But the reason why a lot of this stuff still exists has twofold. One, AI. AI doesn't exist in the Star Citizen universe. It does sort of, but it doesn't work properly. So most of humanity's inventions have to be done with very dumb AI, or similar to the peak advancement that we have right now. Maybe a little bit more, but not much more technologically advanced than we are right now in terms of artificial intelligence. So less processing speed, not nearly as efficient over time. That slows down the development. Space and just the distances and travel, also without full infrastructure built, that takes time and effort. And a lot of that, like at least the first 200 years of human history, beyond the 21st century, was just trying to develop Mars, which took a long time. So especially without AI. So as humanity began to expand, they had to expand within the constraints of almost our modern day in many ways, with some advancements like quantum technologies and such. But by the time you hit the first of Iron War, humanity really had only really just started to advance in many ways in terms of military and just exploration technology. And the Retaliator was the first generation of the new military tech. Then the Measures happened. And when the Measures happened, technology was focused less on actual innovations that would help humanity and more who could scratch Measures back the most. And so you have this situation where everyone is openly corrupt. Everyone is trying to be a sycophant towards the Measures and hoping that the systems they build are effective for what they do, but not necessarily always the case. A great example of this is Apocalypse Arms, which were built to be war crimes. But they're not exactly advanced war crimes. It doesn't take a lot to kill a civilian, an armored civilian, but having a massive Gatling cannon that has a ton of rounds can kill a lot of civilians. That's the Apocalypse Arms. That's kind of how they began to be funded, was ways to efficiently deal with large crowds. And a lot of this technology is based off of things like crowd suppression, anti-insurgent infiltrations. And so a lot of these, how to build a bigger gun. So all of these sorts of things became avenues of super weapons that either never came to pass or were hindered by the fact that if you question too much, you might end up in a gulag. So it's this kind of balance back and forth. So you didn't see a lot of innovation. You tend to see a lot of more of making the old tech up to new standards. And by the time the Mezers were dethroned in the late 28th century, humanity was in fucking shambles. The UEE was a shadow of itself. And eventually, by the 29th and early 30th centuries, you see humanity starting to climb itself back out of that hole. But in the meantime, the technologies and ships that were built by the Mezer era were the ones that you had to hold on to because those are the tools you had at the time. So that's the rise of Anvil. Anvil is this new technological leap, advancements, this new change in military technology, and they're slowly replacing Aegis. RSI is a little bit in there as well, kind of trying to mix things up a little bit. But Aegis is being phased out. But because Aegis was such the sycophantic lapdog of the Mezers for so long, their technology is everywhere. So it was kind of in this weird political, technological situation where some things work, some things don't, but a lot of it is held down by just, dictatorships don't tend to breed technological innovation. War crimes intensify. Built for war crimes. Not even joking, built for war crimes. The entirety of the late Mezer era is essentially how can we kill the most civilians possible? They tried to weaponize terraforming technology. That's how goddamn stupid they went. Yeah, but for instance, more people died building the V2s than died because of the V2s. The massive fuck off tanks that the Nazis built that were super innovative also were incredibly fuel hungry and inefficient. They were for every massive super advanced tank that they built, the Allies could build like 14 others. And again, most of the Allies' technology was built under less restrictive means. Even the vaunted T-34 was built by an American, was designed by an American, if I remember correctly. So you have these gives and takes in the reality. It's like the people who imagine the Nazis they built these super weapons. Their weapons were fucking shit. They were terrible. They didn't do what they wanted to do. And they were very inefficient for what they wanted to do. Most of those tanks were replaced rather than repaired. But the Allied tanks, yeah. Well, no, there's a lot of repair going on, but yeah. So the Mezers were basically trying to make the UEE, the Imperium from 40K. And thanks for the answer. This question has been killing me. Yeah, so like it's one of those things that a lot of people point at, like, why is there 900 years in the future, but we use 100 years old ships and technology is so slow? And it's really hard to answer because it's a lot of different things. The decentralized nature of humanity, the late start that humanity got comparatively, and the long period of about 300 years of absolute dictatorship and the 100 years afterwards, which were very chaotic, that really destabilized the ability for people to innovate properly. A lot of those technologies were developed beforehand, though. Like the V2 was an interesting technology, but it wasn't like the rockets weren't being built in the United States, just not to that scale. Goddard was a great example, who predated von Braun by many years. Jet technology wasn't invented by the Nazis; it was invented by the British. The British built jets well before the Nazis did. It's a myth that these super weapons built by the Nazis would have been great, if only. No, they weren't. They were crap. They were terrible machines. They were built using technology at the time as a last-ditch effort because Hitler was insane. Like, this is only hearsay. Please tell me if I'm wrong. Anyone who's here who's from Germany or speaks German, that Wunderwaffen, the names that were given, these wonder weapons, is kind of a joke in Germany as to mean something that's overly complicated and doesn't need to exist and is usually pretty bad. It's kind of like a different meaning from what we think. It's like a kind of a slang term for shit. Maybe I'm wrong with that. I don't know. Yeah, a weapon to inspire fear more than efficient weaponry. Yeah, and building you can also see the differences between the V2, which wasn't very efficient, to the American rocket program, which also developed the semiconductor, which helped spur the technological and computer revolutions of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The kind of cascading effect because it was made more democratic. Even in the USSR, there was more of a expansion of technologies because of the development of war weapons, not in spite of it. But it was also made available to other people. And so I think that's the major differences you have to understand, is that there's a difference between technologies developed for war by crazy people who will kill you if it doesn't work, and technology developed for war, which you get more incentive to build because you get money, but also you can then turn around and use those technologies in other aspects. I think that's the mentality shift you have to understand about the differences between the Meser era UEE and modern UEE, and why the modern UEE seems to be advancing much faster than we've had in the past, simply because we decided to trade with the goddamn Xi'an instead of trying to shoot them, and suddenly we have more technology from them because it's easier to take commercial technology from them and adapt it into our systems, a la MISC, than it is to steal their wrecks and try to reverse engineer them. You know? The railgun is a good example of weapons used in World War II. Artillery gun on a train car so big it could fire in the direction of the tracks for fear of knocking itself over, and required hundreds of people to operate. It was big and scary, but not actually useful. Yeah. Case in point with the Mesers, they tried to weaponize terraforming technology, which takes tens, if not 100 years to actually function. Big, scary laser is big and scary, but requires a lot of energy. You have to build it in the system. It takes a lot of time to set up and actually use. To even miniaturize that takes a lot of effort, and probably more effort than it is to just build a bigger gun or build more ships that you could use to do the same exact thing. But they spent billions of credits on trying to weaponize essentially a lawnmower. That riding lawnmower, make it a death weapon. What? Oh, it's got blades on it. It can kill things. Make it a death weapon. That's the kind of mentality that was going on through the Mesers, which is to kind of give you an idea of like how backwards their thinking was. Do I think the Retribution is a wonder weapon? Oh, 100%. It's going to fail spectacularly. Can you make it mow humans instead of grass? Basically, yeah. Anyways, that was a off-topic tangent. Let's talk a little bit about the updates. If you haven't seen the latest ISC, please do. I'm not going to go watch it myself. I've done that in the past, but I don't necessarily want to go through all of it. The big one is events. There's a couple of things that have come out recently from that about what they're going to do. Number one, Xenothreat is back, baby. So we're going to get Xenothreat Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. Xenothreat, the darkening, the revengeing. So they've said that they are going to add reputation systems to the Xenothreat event, that they've kind of changed up the pacing of the segments and the missions a little bit, and I think they're going to spread it out a little bit more. They also said that they're going to be introducing, they explained what the Ninetales mission lockdown is going to be, which is going to be Ninetales lock down a station, and then the Crusader Security is going to send out a fleet to escort ships that are trying to make it to the station. You have to break the blockade. You have to send ships that are scanning ships that are designed to scan the region to try to find what's causing the blockade to happen, because essentially there's a bubble of anti-quantum field around the station, so no one can jump into there. So you have to jump out from the outside of the system and then be intercepted by the Ninetales. So one side has to protect scanning ships while they find the anti-quantum device and destroy it. The other side, the Ninetales, have to survive. Essentially, you have to take out those ships or take out these escorting ships. And you can sign up with either the Xenothreat or the Crusader Security. And this is something that they plan on doing on a weekend. Like having a part one, like a prologue of what's going on. And then they're going to have the situation set up for like a day, like on a Saturday. And then this part two ends up on a Sunday. And then, a week later, you have the same kind of thing. And each stage is like a couple of days, but it's repeating. It's not just one thing. It'll happen back and forth again. So was the event coming back? I was under the impression that the group will be around, but the event itself will be one and done. No, it's coming back. That's what they said in the latest ISC, was that they're going to be bringing back the event in its entirety. Now, does that mean it's going to be the same event? No. It's going to be, think of it as part two, as the sequel to Xenothreat. But it's essentially the same story, slightly modified. And then there's two parts. They talk about part one and part two. That's what the Ninetales lockdown that was. There's two other parts which they aren't talking about yet, that you have to find out for ourselves. And then there's they've mentioned Jumptown 2 that's going to come out as well. Now they've said specifically that the Ninetales lockdown is coming out in 3.14. We don't know exactly when in 3.14, but it's coming out in 3.14. So I'm a bit worried that these are only running at certain times. If it's only US Prime, I'm going to be pissed. I imagine it's going to be more than just US Prime. I imagine that they'll run them at various times during a day. They said it's going to only happen in specific couple of hour time frames in a day. So I imagine it'll be running like on Saturday 4 or 5 times. I like that people don't know how to scan, so we'll drop hints to scan things. Part of the new Xenothreat, yeah. I hope they create the same bottleneck, because it was the whole principle behind Jumptown. Something valuable only to a few people can get, and if they make it available to everyone, it won't be valuable to fight over. What they seem to learn from Jumptown, which they've taken to heart, and you can see this with their concept of the Ninetales lockdown, is anti-quantum bubbles. So you cannot jump into an area, specific region, without a period. You have to fly it in there. And I think what they learned from Jumptown, from their thing, and this is something that I noticed as well, and anyone who's part of the Jumptown wars will also back me up on this. One of the major advantages of Jumptown was that Jumptown, you had to not just find and fly to, but you couldn't quantum to it. So you had to fly all the way down and then fly out and then quantum away. As a result, there is a large period where you're vulnerable. You cannot escape through quantum. You're vulnerable to any attacks. And that's when most of the conflicts would happen at Jumptown, was when people were too close to the planet to be able to quantum away, and or not without cover. And I think that's what they learned. They're doing that with that. I think that's what they would do with Jumptown 2. The only thing they'd have to do with Jumptown 2 on top of that is make something that's incredibly valuable that everyone wants to get to be able to sell. That it was two parts. One, the value of the commodity, which wasn't the most valuable commodity in the game, but it was the most, you could make the most money by doing so. And two, the flight. You were restricted in terms of how well you could fly. So you had to take the risk. You couldn't just jump away at any time. The reputation rewards they mentioned are very intriguing. I hope there's viable fun rewards to encourage participation. I do too as well. I want a lawnmower attachment for my Dragonfly. So that's pretty cool. We don't know when Xenothreat part 2 is going to happen. I imagine it's probably not until 3.15 or some point in 3.14. And from the way it was described, it seems like the Ninetales lockdown is less of a event in the traditional one and done sort of thing, and more of a something that'll happen frequently because they're the Ninetales and they hate Crusader security. So they'll always be there hitting and running, stopping a station down for a certain amount of time and then moving on, that kind of stuff. So you would fly all the way down manually only to find a hammerhead parked on the top of the drug lab. Yep. Fucking hammerheads. Homesteading, Dragonfly, plow attachment, and planting crops. Yes, there will be a way you can join the Ninetales. That's what they said specifically. You'll be able to choose either the Ninetales or Crusader security, and reputation will have something involved. So either a hammerhead would be down there, or a the 3-gun is it Retribution? No. The Hurston Dynamics guns. Attrition. The triple attrition arrows, the killer whales, or the Vandal scythes, the blade artists. I don't know what we call them. I think we just called them scythes, scythe pilots. Those were the threats of Jumptown. The hammerheads, the scythes, the triple attrition no shielded arrows, and the orcas, the killer whales. Any idea when the unknown ship is coming? July or done in July? Probably just done in July, not necessarily released in July. And then you get a bunch of buddies to take out a hammerhead, and then you'd hold jump down for a bit so your other buddies could do some runs. Yeah, basically. People would either hold jump down for their friends, or they'd hold jump down and extort people. I used to extort people all the time. Toll boothing? I used to do toll boothing all the time at Jumptown. Killer whales? Killer whales or orcas is the Dark Law special, but it wasn't just Dark Law. Dark Law is probably the most famous person to use an orca, but other people used orcas as well. People forget that orcas were used, and the triple attrition arrows were used specifically because of hammerheads, because hammerheads were impossible to fucking kill. They had insane amounts of shield protection. So the wealthy would use the orcas because the orcas had was a 600i upgunned. Basically, you'd fix all of the guns, like I think they're size 4s, maybe size 3s. You could have 3 of them as the pilot on a 600i. And that's what Mike used to call it. That's what Darklaw used to call it, was the orca. But other people used them as well for the same reason. Origin 404? Maybe. Question. Do you think there's any chance of finding and taming alien pets? Eventually, yeah. They want to do pets, but that's only one of the stretch goals, but it's farther away. Want to run Death Sticks? Going to cost you 20k credits. Yeah, basically. Are we going to use them in combat or buy them as decoration? Knowing CIG, they're going to have some sort of value in game, but probably not direct value. We'll see. 600i, fixed size 5, gimbaled size 4. Yeah, so 3 fixed size 5s. Woo, that's a lot of damage. Is Darklaw the low flyer? He's one of the low flyers, yes. Three size 5s and 600i, yeah. I didn't fly orcas. I flew my miss mostly. Yeah. I flew my I don't think I had a flip, so it was max. I did gun running, I did extortion, but I also ran drugs in Jumptown. Max, baby. Max was a perfect size for it too, because you wouldn't overexert the supply at Jumptown of Widow, but you would you could get just enough to make enough profit. And the Max was perfect because you could probably buy like 50 to 100, fly back, dump it off, come back, and it would be refilled. Is the Daemar Rally in lore? Not officially. It has its own lore, but it's not officially in lore. You flew the arrow? Of course you did, Westbrook. The trip attrition arrow with its shields down. Super effective. If you're interested more in the Jumptown Wars, I made a documentary about player experiences during the Jumptown Wars. It's called The Jumptown Wars documentary. It's on the YouTube, so go check it out. I always try to get people to watch it because no one fucking watched it. Well, not no one. It's like 5,000 views, but compared to some of my best videos, like in terms of like views, it's very low. They should add Daemar's Rally to the lore. They should just take the lore and add it in there, yeah. When they say they're planning to do interior update to the 600i, what do you think they'll do with the huge scanning room? I don't think they're going to change much of the interior in terms of that location. Most of what they want to change with the interior is the back location, the back side of the 600i. But we'll see. Why would you run it with the shields down? Power. You didn't have enough power to constantly fire the attritions. But if you turned, because back then it had 2 shields. So you turn both of the shields off, you would have enough power to not overheat the guns, and you could just constantly fire them. And every time an attrition fired, every shot would double, something like that. So like if the first shot did 2 DPS or 2 damage, the second shot would do 4, the third shot would do 8, the fourth shot would do 16, 32, and would just double each firing. So as it got hotter, it would do more damage. So if you're firing it enough times, it would just do insane amounts of damage. The damage spike would be huge. So you could take out a hammerhead fairly quickly with them. They would absolutely melt hammerheads. You actually got some. Gnarl gave me some footage during that time period, and I put it in the documentary. You can see that he takes out constellations in like 4 hits. It's just fucking stupid. Thank you, Don. And you could one-shot fighters max too because the cannons were so OP. Yeah. People would stealth work back then too, so people would run no shields and get the drop on people. That too. Jumptown was great, Normus. It was absolutely amazing. Now, not everyone agreed. At the time, a lot of people were pissed that it was drawing all this attention. But it was other than Xenothreat, it was my best experience playing Star Citizen. It was just so fun. And I will say, to a degree, because it ended is the reason why it's so good. The reason why I have fond memories, the reason why I made that goddamn documentary was because of how good it was. We set up in Crater, no shields, stealth on everything, turned low, and then we would scout. would give us the heads up. It was so much fun. Yeah, I would be. Usually, what I would do is I'd get a cutlass. If I wasn't running freelancer, if I was running extortion or protection, I would be. You run a cutlass. I would go on the other side of the mountain, turn my shields off. I would have one person who would either be with a on foot with sniper rifle, kind of observing, or one person who was parked in the crater, and then would report to us like, "Hey, this is going on. This is going on." And the second that they would move into the building to buy, we would all activate, get up, just fly over, and just hover. Sometimes we would stay in the crater and like wait for someone to come in, hiding underneath the Jumptown facility. When they walked in, we would all run out and then stand at the door and basically say and try to type through, because this was before voice comms, so we had to type through the chat. Hey, if you're in Jumptown, we're going to kill you. Give us this amount of money. And you had to use the beacon system to get the money. It was so fun. So fucking fun. Oh yeah, why are you shooting me? I'm a legit trader. You're running drugs through Mogadishu, dude. You're running heroin through through downtown Mogadishu. You're not doing legitimate runs. So, yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Let me break the law in peace. Legitimately, people complained about Jumptown because they said, I just am a trader. I just want to make some money. I don't want to be harassed by PvPers with these pirates who are attacking me. Ah! Don Sealer, I have 100% agree with you. I have said something very similar. John Sealer says, I've been chewing on a thought for GTS event. Have a trench cave with super rare, unique ore, both rock and ship mineable. Have an ore vein be a mostly unlimited resource, then let it go. Same idea. I had a similar idea with like, have an asteroid that's quantumable to a degree, that's full of nothing but quantanium, a pure quantanium asteroid that's coming into the system. So players can go out and try to gather pieces of that asteroid, but everyone knows where it is. I love Jumptown and let me do what I wanted to do because everyone was at Jumptown. Let me haul cargo, not worry about being shot. Yeah. I mean, this is around the time of the Cryastro protests, so. I want to be a ne'er-do-well in peace. Keep the other ne'er-do-wells away. The problem with Jumptown Wars was that back then there was no other way to make a meaningful profit by trading. You could make it. It just wasn't the most efficient profit. Because they nerfed the fuck out of gosh, what was it back then? Laranite? It was Laranite. They had nerfed the fuck out of Laranite. And a mistake in terms of the amount of money you could make with Widow, was like a 200, 300% profit with Widow, where it was only like an 80% profit or 50% profit with Laranite. Was it Diamond back then? I thought it was Laranite. Only if they knew the PvP slider was going to do. It was to a group of people according to their preferences only when there were enough players there to demand more than one server. Oh gosh, I remember that one. Have you ever heard the two Anvil ships, Devastator and Osprey from the Jumptown magazine? I have heard of them, yes. The Devastator, I don't know what that is, but the Osprey almost assuredly is the modern Valkyrie. I'm almost guarantee you that that's the Valkyrie. And I have a feeling that the Devastator is actually going to be the whatever capital ship that comes out at the end of the year from Anvil, or whatever similar style large ship that they're coming out with, based off of the lore hints from Invictus. Yeah, I think it was Laranite. I remember Laranite being the big one. Yeah, because I feel like the Osprey was an early version, kind of like how they do variants of the, thank you, Merrick, for all those gift subs. They do they had variants of the Starliner that they eventually just turned into their own ships. Same idea. Yeah, I made tons of making runs from Lesky to Cruel 5. Yes, Cruel 5. I think everyone was at JT, so it was good. And yeah, Laranite Agresium was nerfed. Yeah. Oh, it could be a giant comet that comes in crazy orbit time to time. Yeah, Froofy, that's exactly what I mean. People were running caterpillars full of Widow and Atrusia toxin with cargoes of worth several million. Losing alone really stung. Yeah, but it was worth several million, but it only cost 100,000. It was like insane profit margins, just nuts. Because they also mentioned the Valkyrie too, right? They don't mention the Valkyrie in that document at all. The only thing they mention is the Hornet. They mentioned the Hornet and maybe the Terrapin, if I remember correctly, but in that document. But they don't mention the Valkyrie. They don't mention the Hurricane. They don't mention any of that. Subhype. Question: do we hear anything about the RSI gunboat? I think it was called Odin. Yes, the RSI gunboat is actually called the Perseus, and it was released last IAE. Yeah, end of last year. It was called that's what the leaks people called it, was Odin, but it wasn't Odin. It was Perseus. It also didn't look a lot. It didn't look very much like the concept that they had. Will they add more cities, outposts, of planets of Stanton as we get more systems? That's the whole idea of the current systems of outposts. The what is it called? It's not settlement system. The homestead stuff that they're building on right now. That's supposed to add flavor to Stanton, but also add some more stuff to other systems as well. And they're going to be building out these different tile sets for various different purposes. But yes, they're definitely planning on expanding that stuff in Stanton. That's exactly what the Montreal team, the new studio from Montreal that's formed, that's their job, is to kind of fill out Stanton with that stuff. I just checked, and they did mention both Valkyrie and Osprey. They did. It would be I could almost guarantee you if it was mentioned in the actual thing, it was added later. I'd go back in the way back for that one. You have a link to it? That's not, you're probably looking at the wiki. That's not the, yeah, this is the official portfolio. This is the first time they talk about this before any of those are there. There's the link. All right, so these are the ones that they reference. The Hurricane, the Osprey, the Devastator, the Hornet, and the Gladiator. That's all they mention in that. Yeah, so they've updated it since then. Let me look this up. Because I'm like 90% sure, unless they plan on doing something else, it's either just a lore thing or it's essentially what the Valkyrie would become. Because that's how old the Osprey is. The Osprey and the Devastator were mentioned. They were mentioned a long time ago. It's jump point 094. Going to be like Rust in Star Citizen, pretty cool. Some of that is, yes. April 2021, is that the one you're talking about? Oh yeah, you mentioned that in the most recent one. I think that's just a mistake. Yeah. Because they don't mention the bear cat for ages, even though that's a lore ship. So I think that's just a holdover from their official document. Those are the only other places they're mentioned was the portfolio, which was released April 23rd, 2013. So remember, Matrix of Lies. I think it needs to be verified immediately after the patch release. Bartenders should no longer be missing rest stop at bars. Yeah, we could definitely check that out. Felt bad for new players during JT. They had no idea what kind of potential storm they were walking into. I felt good about it. I tried not to screw over people in Auroras, but honestly, more players actually showed up to because of Jumptown than otherwise would have. And I saw streamers show up who never even heard of Star Citizen before Jumptown, who were participating in Jumptown because of it. Especially players who ended up being who were heavy Tarkov players. Space Rust, yeah. How much lore do you think the writing team has stashed away? Likely, in terms of hard and fast lore, I would say probably 1,000 pages. Easy. Maybe 2,000 pages worth. In terms of that and like other kind of loose lore, probably an additional 1,000 pages. Maybe 500 additional pages on top of that. A lot of this is probably just notes and, you also have to think about all the stories they've written, which most of them are like 5 to 6 pages long. Some of them are longer, like 10 to 20 pages long. Then you've got all the portfolios. Then you have all of the individual stories, which are like the individual like portfolios on ships and companies and events. That's just what's publicly available. That doesn't even mention any of the stuff that they've have in the background that involves Squadron 42. Plus, you have to include all of the Squadron 42 documents, which are already several hundred pages long themselves. There's a lot of lore that hasn't been released. Yeah, the other stuff that was coming out for the ISC, other than that, which is all exciting for gameplay purposes, is that they were working on loot. They're going to talk a little bit more about this Friday, about how looting's going to work. They also had discussions on, if I remember correctly, it was more specific directional thruster dust. So like depending on where you are, where your thrusters are, will kick up dust in the area around you. Fire propagation, new types of fire propagation they were working on. I'm blanking on anything else. Those are the ones that I remember. In fact, just for shits and giggles, let's finish this off with that. There we go.
From the number of
Oh yeah, the new systems. There's the Eclipse Mutual, which is a life insurance company, a medical insurance life insurance company. Tax Collection Bureau. Cousin Crows, which does customized craft. A direction of thrusters, fire propagation. Pause this.
fields being used to direct the venting of flames and smoke throughout the hull of a ship. And speaking of ships, work has begun on revisions to the Aegis Retaliator, bringing it up to the gold standard, including changes to the internal metrics needed for successful NPC traversal, moving the docking collar, adjusting the lift dimensions, and more. Work also continues on the Aegis Redeemer gray box interior, with these looks at the remote turret bay, further changes to the habitation section, and development of the internal machinery that keeps this floating gunship up in the air.
Garbage.
We also have this look at the continuing gray box progress of the Ares Starfighter from Crusader Industries, a ship that's coming together rather quickly based on all the previous work completed for the Mercury and the Hercules. Next up, with work on converting all flyable ships to the canvas-sliced HUD in 3.14
Drake HUD. Mwah. Gorgeous.
continuing, designers and artists have begun concepting out additional manufacturer-based heads-up displays like this proposal for Drake interplanetary ships, seen here in several color variations. Now we're still pulling together other proposed layouts and color schemes, but it's another exciting step forward in diversifying the flight experience of our spacecraft, made possible by our UI tech team. Tomorrow,
Oh, Jesus, please, had something in the background so we can see our fucking HUDs. I didn't even think about that. Like, I just saw that. I was like, oh, it looks cool. It's like, no, please, Jesus, fix the HUD problem so we can see stuff, CIG. Like, add a drop shadow or something in the background that we can see. Oh, God. All right.
On Star Citizen Live, we'll have Dan Truffin and members of the EU Persistent Universe feature team on the show to answer questions about their work. And one of the new aspects they're currently working on is loot generation, seen here in testing on Korea Station. Now we'll talk more about how it works, what can be found inside, and how it interacts with the upcoming advances to player inventory tomorrow. So check that out. And wrapping things up this week with a look at some environment work, we have this look at potential prop placement overlays for the exteriors of our colonial outposts, an early look at white box progress of the hospital being built out for Grimhex,
Green Imperial Health. Reception.
as well as white box progress on the smaller clinics that will populate several of the various space stations found throughout the Stanton system.
Get well.
And lastly, a look at the continuing lighting pass going on throughout Horizon, the upcoming landing zone for the gas giant Crusader. Now we'll be talking more about everything that goes into bringing Horizon to life, from the lighting to the VFX to the NPC costumes, the signage and the iconography, and even the music next week in our quarterly season finale. So stay tuned.
Hey, Pedro, could you just make something pretty cool looking sound? Cool. Straight fire. All right.
For that. So what did we learn this week? Well, we learned that dynamic events are not only a fantastic way to add activity and conflict.
Thank you, Jared. All right. The other thing I realized is someone asked about this Cousin Crows. I think that maybe they heard us. Maybe. And we might be able to customize our ships in-game using in-game like systems. Maybe. Please? Pedro's a pimp, yeah. I mean, you can just listen. This is the music. If you hear the music here that he's playing, that's playing right here.
As well as white box progress on the smaller clinics that will populate several of the various space stations found throughout the Stanton system.
This is Pedro's music. And I can already tell you, Pedro mixed more traditional epic science fiction sort of stuff, and specifically added in orchestral and choral elements of church music into the background. And the reason why he did that is because Crusader is canonically a very religious organization. Not really, but it was at least founded as a religious organization, Christian organization. Specifically, it was called Seraphim Systems, and then eventually became Crusader Industries when it became more secular. Ironically, Crusader became more secular. So that's where that this kind of element thinks. Think of like the era between the kind of post-Renaissance, modern and early modern kind of music was very heavy on like Bach kind of things that like have definitely were commissioned for religious purposes, but weren't specifically religious. That's just my own thoughts on the process from what I hear. I'm not a music historian in any way, shape, or form, so I could be speaking out my ass. So no, they don't listen to us. Decals, I want space pinups. Yes, we do. I do too. It's just Pedro. Pedro's just a baller. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Looking great. Looking great. It looks like the Destiny Tower. It does. I've always gotten Destiny Tower vibes since the very beginning. The early concept images of Orison are basically Destiny Tower. They actually, I think, stole the banners from the Destiny Tower and put it in there as part of like the maybe just kind of as visualization props. But it's obvious they took heavy inspiration from the Destiny Tower. 3.4, the high patch. Yeah. Now, I think the only big thing that 3.4 is lacking after looking this is still no addressing specifically of desync. They've managed to do a bunch of other things, but desync still hasn't been addressed as in terms of is it being tackled? Is it being worked on? And again, as I said very early in the stage, we don't know, and we may never know until the game actually gets to PTU. But if it isn't addressed in 3.14, I fear that it will be a little too late in terms of the patch itself. And especially if it's not addressed in 3.14, CIG needs to address it because it is, at that point, it has been going on for over a year and is detrimentally affecting the gameplay. It's been getting worse patch to patch. So the high patch would be 420. When you speak out your ass, does your breath stink? Good question. Tower 1 or Tower 2? Tower 1. Very inspired, very much Tower 1. Let me pull up early concept images of Orison before we go so you can see what I mean. This is the one. Yeah. Here it is. Look at that fucking shit. Look at that. That is straight up a Destiny symbol right there. This is definitely inspired by the Destiny Tower. It's beautiful. But it's definitely, I think this is straight from Destiny. Now, I think that they may have changed those out since then. But they definitely were inspired heavily by by Destiny. I think that's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Statement. The way that they implement those systems, like loot, carrying things, even opening your doors and turning on lights, seem to be geared for a sim that you don't have to worry about pirates. Yes and no. I think the purpose is, I think the biggest issue right now is that they're geared towards a sim-like experience. But having to worry about pirates is different because I think right now the time to kill is way too high. And I think that's the big difference. It's like they're building a system right now for a lower time to kill, but haven't implemented the lower time to kill yet because that system isn't in place yet. It's a little bit of a different. My favorite part of the video was the thruster effect on planet surface. I'm actually interested in that too. I think that the thruster effect on the planet's surface is going to be very interesting simply because you could be used as an offensive tool. You come down in a drop ship on top of people who need to get a hot drop, like picked up and get out. You can literally just come in a little hot tip at the right direction towards the enemy and create a smoke screen for your troops before they're getting in, so it actually obscures them. Should be kind of cool. Staring out at a moon with habs in the beginning and introducing ships and fluff with new moons would be a good way to start the game out. Yeah. When will we get our hangars to personalize in the house? I don't know. Soon-ish. TM. CIG. I want to be a medic in the Grimhex hospital. It seems like it could be a good laugh. Stand still! Don't squirm so much! This will only hurt a little bit! Drake HUD was looking boss. Looking forward to getting to the test that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Thank you for gifting that sub to the Crakeland. You high? You want a shorter TTK? I'm sorry, longer TTK. Did I screw that up? Longer TTK. I want a longer TTK. Right now it's too short. I want it longer. And I think that's the key, is that the game is built for a high TTK or whatever. The game is built for taking it longer for you to die, but currently it's very easy to die. Yes, Loken. But I think that creates the issue where you have all of these sim-like elements where controlling the lights, loot, pulling out loot individually, operating doors. These all seem more sim-like and slow, which means you're going to be vulnerable to fast attack pirates, and pirates will do everything they can to be as efficient as possible to take you out, or combatants will. So it's basically leaving whoever's the most prepared faster wins. And I think that the reason why that's the case right now is because there is a very low TTK. But the game is being built for a higher TTK and a less of a time to kill and more of a time to disable. Yeah, exactly. It's more of a time to disable than time to kill. You're going to end up with less of of pretty explosions and more of we can't operate our ship anymore. Which means you'll have to choose to either abandon ship or fight for borders, that kind of stuff. My being paranoid is Connie Tourist went a bit radio silent. You're being paranoid. The latest update to the roadmap moved it to committed, which is pretty certain it's going to be released either 3.14 or 3.14.1. Well, it's not even just that there's no more HP bubbles. It's that now it's going to be, the HP is going to be moved away from specific, from like specific parts or from the ship, or, you know, like the whole ship, to being only mattering on components. So you may still have HP, but the HP is going to be centered on your power plant. So you can do a through and through the hull. You can hit the hull on the wing all you want, or you can hit the main fuselage all you want. if it doesn't intersect with an important system, it just doesn't do anything. Pretty much. So there'll be a difference between structural damage and damage to components. And the thing that gets people to go boom or stop fighting is damage to components. And there won't be dual health bars in terms of disable time and die bar. It'll essentially be the health pool is going to be based around less of explosions and more no more parts existing. I'm guessing that there'll be some sort of crit chance. They'll build something up there that if you disable a reactor, like a power plant, or if you hit the power plant at the right way, it'll explode. But you have to hit it in the right direction or in the right fashion for it to make it explode. Otherwise, it'll just disable, and then you have to like keep hitting it until the reactor goes critical and explodes. I also want, and this is a big request from CIG, do not allow for players to self-destruct the second they realize they're going to lose. Require the self-destruct system to have power to the engines or power to the main batteries. Essentially, the self-destruct system should be something in-game, like the reactor going critical. And if the reactor is going critical to self-destruct, then there needs to be power to the reactor or some sort of command switches to the reactor. So you should either have a manual connection to it or there should be some lines to it, essentially, that should exist. That way, just self-destructing isn't just a, oh, fuck you, I'm going to go, boom, set my self-destruct and go fuck yourself. It needs to be a tactic you use that requires skill. That requires as much skill as, maybe less skill than a typical pirate, but still skill. Or the quantum drive. Yeah, I think the quantum drive is probably the bigger one, but yeah. From what I've noticed, the ships are at or near gold standard. The power plant tends to be centrally located and well protected. Yeah. Large ships like the C2 and bigger, yeah, I could see that. 2 people activate in unison. Something like that, yeah. Fighters should be able to do it as well, or smaller ships should be able to do it as well, but they definitely need to have some sort of direct command to a reactor or to a quantum drive. There needs to be some sort of sequence that you have to implement, not just shift backspace to set off your self-destruct, and your ship needs to be entirely healthy, or the reactor needs to be entirely healthy in order to do so. Self-destruct makes sense. It's a sci-fi game, so you want to have it, but it also makes sense if you want to use it as a trap. So say you have borders on your ship, but you have the ability to escape, you can lure people onto your ship, the self-destruct sequence, eject out of your ship, or take an escape pod and eject, and by the time you eject, by the time they realize the self-destruct system is activated, boom, all of them are dead and you're safe. Or use it as a bomb, like you're getting close, your ship is not able to function, but it still has enough power to set it self-destruct. You push it towards a large enemy ship, set it to self-destruct, bail out, and turn it into a fire ship, essentially, where it gets close enough, it just explodes and takes out the shields or does some more damage, as a last fuck you before you leave, sort of thing. I don't have to scan the ship to see its health. Self-destruct should have a variable timer. It should be, a self-destruct system should be a little bit more complex than it is now, is basically what I'm saying. The current system does not really work for gameplay purposes. Because what happens is, if a pirate ambushes a trader and that trader is dead to rights, and a pirate goes, listen, all I want is this amount of money, they'll just self-destruct and say, fuck you. Like, it's not fun gameplay. That's just shitty player behavior. And you want to punish that player behavior because they're essentially, they fucked up, didn't do well, or didn't pay attention, and now they're punishing pirates for doing the good job of being a pirate and doing behavior that they want to encourage, which is communication between players. That behavior needs to be rewarded, whereas being a shitty asshole who can't stand the fact that they just lost should be punished. And I don't mean the word, maybe not punish is a hard word, but have consequences. Similar to how jail is consequences for being a pirate or being an outlaw, there needs to be consequences for you not being good at observing your surroundings. Yeah. Hey, JazzyBot. Thank you, Chevelle, for that 20 months of sub. Yeah, there needs to be some sort of consequences for the actions. So there needs to be balance that. Now, what I'm talking about is something that Space Cutlet and Pirates and Star Citizen have been talking about for literal years. And as someone who wants that kind of gameplay to happen, I agree. I would rather pirates be incentivized not to just blow your ass up and take the pieces, but to essentially say, hey, give me your stuff and I won't kill you, and that being the better option. And there are ways to do that. Question, with the largest ships, if they're not for sale, will players be able to build them? No. Encouraged to play the intended way. Yes. Oh, hey, Broken Monkey. Hi, Paul. You make the pods on the... you think making the pods on the Raylan harder to scan might add value to it? Xi'an freight being discreet feels right and might justify the weird place amongst the haulers. Possibly. We'll see, though. I'd say different protocol for different ships. I agree with that. Maybe remove the self-destruct option altogether from fighters because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Maybe have it be a system that's installed on military fighters, but not on civilian. Or have it be an add-on system. So like the subcomponent, like a subcomponent for reactors that takes up other things that you can say, hey, you can have a reactor with all these different efficiency boosts for subcomponents, or you can pull out one of those efficiency boosts and put in a self-destruct system that allows you to self-destruct, but it's a meaningful option, especially if they're both doing the subcomponents. I don't know how they're planning on doing that, but you know. Star Citizen needs to look at the many things Elite did wrong and try to design systems to avoid it. Exactly. I was in a self-destruct mechanism external from the cockpit designed to be used when the ship is being scuttled concerning a fighter. Yeah, something like that would make sense. But I also would like it to be something that is a decision rather than being a standard complement. Because it doesn't make a lot of sense for a freighter to have a standard self-destruct system. makes self-destruct use a service slot. What is Alien Weekend? I think Saturday or Sunday? It might be tomorrow, but I don't know. So no guilds being able to be shipbuilders. Not in the Eve sense, no. They have talked about the idea of getting a factory node that players could operate. But they said that like what they would like players to do is be able to build weapons or missiles or components. But, you know, essentially you're getting subcontracted by another company to build, you know, Ignite 2 missiles for, I don't remember who, Maxox or whatever. And then you still have to, you have the ability to build them because you bought the rights to, and you can sell them, but you have to kind of, there's an upfront cost of that. But you won't be able to build ships. Speaking of Christopher Lloyd and self-destruct, do you think they'll have an audible countdown throughout the entire ship when it's activated? I mean, it's a standard, trope, but I think it would also make sense in terms of goal, in terms of what their goals are. Yeah, the Mantis is paper thin. I think it needs to be able to disrupt range and still be able to dodge shots. The Mantis is more the like warp bubbles from Eve. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Not every ship should be able to hold down other ships from quantuming, but you definitely need some... The ships that do it need to do it well. They need to be really good at their jobs if they're going to sacrifice other things. Do you think the actual alien ships will be inoperable by humans? Not talking about the alien converted ones. Probably. Making consumables, not ships. Yes, they'd be making consumables, not ships. I thought you were talking about the Platinum Foxes thing, where it's just like I'm just gonna duct tape some bombs to my reactor. That might be an option too, but I think having a dedicated self-destruct system needs to be an option, needs to be a choice, not a feature, and it needs to be a meaningful choice, and there needs to be ways of going around it or disabling it before they get a chance to. Because 100% I have seen this happen. I literally saw it. Those who came from Burks may remember this stream. I watched Burks' stream where he was doing FBI Burks and was stopping a miner who was mining. And over VoIP, he went up to him and said, give me money, or something like that. He was basically just like, I'm investigating. You need to shut down your ships or whatever. It was basically extorting them, and after a long pause, he hit the self-destruct and destroyed him and killed Burks as well at the same time. It was a funny joke at the time, but I've seen that time and time again where they just would rather self-destruct than hand over any or interact, which is not fun. So. I agree with those, that the death of a spaceman and that insurance claim are going to hurt him. But I feel like there needs to also be some other meaningful aspect. Because the problem about self-destruct is that I don't think it adds enough meaningful gameplay to the game. I don't think it does anything but spites pirates right now. There's no purpose for it right now other than blowing yourself up so you don't have to hand over whatever you have to a pirate. And I think that's boring gameplay implementation. Because that's just giving a tool, an overpowered tool to a player to use against another player in a player versus player environment, especially when CIG has specifically said they want to discourage pirates from killing people and more encourage them to just take things in order to not be brought into for the reputation system, so they don't gain a negative reputation, which will then get them onto the radar of the law. Or too much of a negative reputation, because killing people will spike your negative reputation and have bad people be sent after you. So with that in mind, there needs to be equally something as disadvantageous for traders. It's just too one-sided right now. That's true, Eric, but that the problem is that there's no guarantee that the pirate won't ask for more money or not kill you after they give him money. That's true, but there's more disadvantages for the pirate killing you than you trusting a pirate. And that's always going to be a risk, whether you trust a pirate or not. But if they just kill you, there will be consequences for them, which is greater than you giving them money. And you just self-destructing is boring. You could try to escape, you could try to fight, you could try to flee, you could try to negotiate, you could try to talk. There's like 15 different things you can do other than self-destructing, which are all much more entertaining and much more gameplay oriented than just fuck you, fuck me, fuck all of this. That's incredibly petty and, again, boring. It doesn't engage the pirate because the pirate's not having a fun time. It doesn't really engage you because you just wasted all your time and effort to do everything you were doing. Fuck that. And anyone around you doesn't get a chance to save you or interact or intercede. None of that happens. So there's no meaningful player interaction through that experience. It's just letting a trader throw up his e-peen because he'd rather die than lose money. It's boring. If you were carrying extremely dangerous or precious cargo with orders not to let them fall into enemy hands, then self-destruct mechanisms would make sense. I agree, but that should also be an option that is built after the fact rather than being standard. My corollary to what you're describing is that my 5 years in Star Citizen, my encounters with random players have always ever been negative experiences. My only positive player group experience has been pre-planned, so why should I ever cooperate or interact with a random pirate? Thus far, my best bet has been to simply go AFK, and they'll either get killed or get bored and leave. I think that's because the systems aren't available right now. There's no, up until recently, there wasn't even the system to be able to give people money or to even drop your cargo. So pirates have had to kind of be different. And a lot of people would call pirates are just PvPers. People just kill people. And I think that has more to do with you, Anxious, than does, the pirate. You just go AFK and just say, oh, whatever, I lost, I'm dead anyways. That sounds like you just didn't try to escape. You didn't try to talk. You didn't try to do anything. You just gave up. Seems like the pirate's problem, though. A self-destruct is a legit sci-fi item. I mean, yes, it's a legitimate sci-fi item, but it's boring just to have it be standard fare and not have any gameplay consequences for having one. You just have one. Like, we also got to remember this is also a game, and it's a PvP and PvE game. It's a MMO. There should be some ways to encourage players' experiences. If you cooperate with a pirate, you will live. That's the point. The best pirates who don't get caught or make the most money will be the ones who come to you and say, give us half of your cargo. Dump half your cargo and we'll let you live. You dump your half your cargo, they let you go. The best pirates are the ones you will know on a first name basis and will leave you nice little gift baskets of bread. Give you some nice wine on your way through, just so you can give half the cargo. Because a pirate isn't really there to kill people. A pirate is there for the thrill of the chase and to make money on the side. I give up now because, and Anxious, I think, you say you give up now because all my previous encounters with random players have always been negative, no matter the interaction or attempted interaction with them. I think as the gameplay systems are being introduced, as they have been, you will start to see that start to change. But leaving the self-destruct system as it is negative towards that change. Death of the Spaceman is important, yes. But again, like I said, there needs to be more to it than just Death of the Spaceman. I also 100% believe that you're going to have convalescence time if you die. You know how you have prison, you're there for a couple hours? I wouldn't be surprised if CIG slapped like a 30-minute cooldown or an hour-long cooldown on your character's entire health. So you try to move, you move slower, you ain't able to lift as many things, your reaction time is lower, you may have some fizzle effects in your screen. I can almost guarantee you're not going to like dying because you're going to be done for a while. Now, let's be careful with how we phrase that, Astro. A good pirate will follow a code of equilibrium with an ecosystem. A bad pirate will literally kill for the lulz. Something about the wolf and the law of the jungle. Well, a good pirate will also find ways of attacking a trader before they could have a time to react. Be able to maybe take out escorts that are escorting them and disable a freighter without killing the freighter. There's still some combat involved in piracy. It's not just attack people, but Cloning sickness or something. Yeah. I mean, respawn sickness is a thing in almost every single MMO. Like some sort of cooldown for when you first come back. You're going to get medical insurance timers. Yeah, something like that. So it's going to start hurting. Probably sooner, possibly by the end of this year. Like that's like res sickness from World of Warcraft. Exactly. When that becomes expensive to suicide, I'll probably put a bounty on your head when it comes to thing ask for. I mean, especially if you're transporting cargo, or especially when you're transporting cargo from place to place. And it's not your cargo and you self-destruct, you're going to have to pay for that cargo. Rehabilitation isn't only in Kleischer. Exactly. People are going to start seeing death as the prison, as the lawful prison. Because you can move around a lot, but you're not going to be able to play the game much. Not doing what you want to do. All right, I've been talking for way too long. I've been these office hours have been getting longer and longer as I've been doing them. They're supposed to be 2 hours. We're almost at 3.5. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. It was great discussions, great talking with you, answering all those questions about lore, looking at some of the updates and stuff like that. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you enjoyed this, please do jump over to Twitch, www.twitch.tv/theastropub, https:// twitch.tv/theastropub. Join us Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. Where we do this, we do a live gameplay, we do podcasts, we do tabletop RPGs, tons of stuff. Come join us there. And if you're watching this on Twitch, go over to youtube.com/theastropub and watch my lore videos. I do some other videos every so often. I do guides on smuggling. I do some kind of thoughts on new things coming out, new events and such like that. In-depth guides on lore. And of course, our Captain's Table podcast is put up there regularly, so if you want to come back there. And thank you for watching. Like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black. And remember, ex Historia ad Astra. Come on. Press your brakes. Later, guys.